This black, ominous-looking snake won't hurt you. It's got no fangs. You may have mistakenly thought that this black critter is none other than a black mamba, but it's just a harmless rat snake. There's one main sign that can help you figure out if a snake is really dangerous. Unfanged species do not have a venom delivery system, therefore, their bites won't harm you that much. But if you see a snake with fangs, you're in real danger. If you come across a snake, it's best to leave the area and seek assistance from a wildlife professional in identifying the reptile. Here are some tips to help you distinguish between the two types. Observe their behavior, nesting habits, and habitats. Some snakes may shake their tails as a warning signal. Also, venomous snakes typically have triangular-shaped heads, compared to non-venomous snakes with rounded heads. Time for an optical illusion. Can you spot a snake here? You'd better be attentive because there's a boomslang hiding on that tree. This slithery critter has mastered the art of disguise, and it likes to pretend to be a tree branch. Also, boomslangs may not have the best sense of smell, but they make up for it with their ability to detect chemicals in the air. Using their tongues, they gather odor molecules and press them against their sensory organs in the mouth. This snake is venomous. Just look at those fangs. Still, while they're not in use, the snake can neatly fold back its fangs into its mouth. Rattlesnakes and humans have something in common. Both have a lot of keratin-made accessories in our bodies. Human nails and hair are made of keratin, and rattlesnakes' rattles are made of it too. The staple sounds these slithery creatures make are similar to the noise we humans can make when we rub our nails against one another. But these reptiles do it super fast, so it almost sounds like hissing. Whenever the snakes shed, they add up a new segment to their rattle. But it's not like the older a snake is, the more segments it has. Their rattles may wear off or break, just like our nails. Rattlesnakes, as well as many other snakes, have a unique inner ear structure that doesn't include an eardrum. This means they can't pick up airborne sounds like we do. Instead, their inner ear is connected to their jaw, and they use this mechanism to feel vibrations. Biologists are still figuring out whether snakes detect sounds through pressure or mechanical vibrations in their bodies. They're also quite selective eaters. Rattlesnakes only chow down when they're feeling hungry, with adults usually waiting around 2 weeks between meals. These sneaky hunters usually go after mice, rats, squirrels, and rabbits, but they won't say no to a bird if they manage to catch one. Younger rattlesnakes, on the other hand, tend to have a heartier appetite, sometimes dining as often as once a week. Now look at their huge fangs. They're like hypodermic needles, hollow and sharp, allowing them to inject venom. What's really cool is that these fangs are hinged and lie flat against the snake's upper jaw when its mouth is closed, only to spring forward perpendicularly when it strikes. Majestic cottonmouths are named this way because of the striking white coloration inside their mouths that they display when threatened. These semi-aquatic serpents effortlessly navigate both water and land, earning them the moniker water moccasin. Equipped with heat-sensing facial pits nestled between their eyes and nostrils, they possess an extraordinary ability to detect even the slightest temperature variations, honing in on potential prey with precision. Rarely do cottonmouths bite humans, reserving their venomous strike for moments of provocation. Here's a tip on how to distinguish between non-venomous water snakes and their venomous counterparts, cottonmouths. While water snakes boast a slender build, cottonmouths exude a robust and weighty presence. The telltale signs continue with water snakes sporting elongated, slender tails and heads proportionate to their necks, contrasting with the blocky and broad head of a cottonmouth. The pupils of the water snake are round, a departure from the vertical, cat-like pupils of cottonmouths. Plus, non-venomous snakes don't have the distinctive facial pits characteristic of pit vipers, like cottonmouths. Here's another venomous star, the copperhead snake. Their musk smells just like cucumbers. Their venom is pretty particular too. Will you be in trouble if this snake bites you? Totally. Does it help cure lethal conditions? Sorta. It's not 100% proven fact so far, but scientists have been testing this theory for quite a while, and they did notice that the copperhead snake's venom can, if not cure some serious conditions, but slow down their progression. Even so, they have the most venomous bites among all the US snakes, but antivenom for the bites somehow is not always needed. Coral snakes are known for their non-aggressive nature, as they are shy and secretive creatures. Theirs make up less than 1% of snake bites in America. Their venom is a neurotoxin that paralyzes nerves, and due to their small teeth, they must chew on their prey to inject the venom. When feeling threatened, a coral snake will curl the tip of its tail to confuse the attacker about the location of its head. The mysterious and mesmerizing black mamba, also known as the black-mouthed mamba, calls the rocky savanna its home and loves to hang out near termite mounds. With a color range from gray to dark brown, its name comes from the dark interior of its mouth. Black mambas hold the title of some of the fastest-moving snakes globally, reaching speeds of 10 to 12 miles per hour on a sleek surface. Despite its fierce reputation, unprovoked attacks on humans remain unproven, and the snake is actually responsible for only a small number of lethal cases each year. Saw-scaled vipers possess a fascinating ability to produce a spine-chilling noise, accompanied by a striking threat display. The unique shape of their scales allows them to create a prolonged rattling hiss or sizzle when they move in a particular terrifying manner. These sounds serve as a clear warning to anyone in close proximity to the snake. Despite being responsible for many fatalities, without treatment, the saw-scaled viper's bites are fatal in fewer than 10% of cases. This contrasts starkly with the king cobra and black mamba, whose untreated bite fatalities are significantly higher. Saw-scaled vipers are known for their extreme aggression and lightning-fast strikes, making them some of the quickest and most unpredictable snakes in the world. When you're out hiking in the bush, remember not to mess with any snakes you come across, even if they don't seem alive. Some sneaky snakes play possum and can strike if bothered. If you spot one, give it some space. When it comes to snakes, they're usually pretty shy and won't bother you unless they feel threatened. Trying to catch or harm a snake is a big no-no, as that's when most snake bites occur. And don't be tricked by their size. Even little snakes can pack a punch. For example, baby brown snakes are born with venom, so it's best to admire them from a safe distance. Each year, over 7,000 Americans fall victim to snake bites, often due to misguided attempts to handle or fight a snake. It's crucial to avoid such actions and seek immediately medical help if bitten. Understanding how to differentiate between venomous and non-venomous snakes is key to assessing potential risks. Contact a professional if you're unsure about a snake's identity, and never handle a snake, even if it appears harmless. If there were a profession of evolutionary or nature detective, the first thing such detectives would do is investigate the mystery of anteaters. For some reason, after dinosaurs, different species of mammals evolved to feed on ants. And such mammals appeared at least 12 times. While investigating these mysteries, you will learn about new properties of evolution that will also understand what anteaters, pets, and crabs have in common. What? Yep, crabs play an important role in this detective story. So, scientists have recently conducted a large-scale study and found out that over the past 66 million years, different mammals have chosen a lifestyle where they only eat ants. At least 12 separate evolutionary lineages of mammals have adapted to this diet. From the point of view of evolution, there is a logic here. Ants are very nutritious. Most species of ants are harmless and non-venomous. They don't harm anyone and are constantly multiplying. They are an unlimited supply of nutrients. By the way, according to research, the total number of ants is about 20 quadrillion. 1 quadrillion is 1 million billion. Can you imagine that? And the total biomass of these ants is 12 megatons. 1 megaton contains 1 million tons. If you weigh all the wild animals and birds on Earth, their combined weight will be less than the total mass of ants. This weight is 20% of the biomass of all humankind. But that wasn't always like that. After dinosaurs disappeared, the proportion of ants was less than 1% of the total insect population. But their numbers increased sharply to about 23 million years ago at the beginning of the period known as the Miocene. More and more animals include ants in their diet. Science calls feeding exclusively on ants obligate myrmecophagy. In addition to their nutritional properties and almost unlimited numbers, ants are easy to get. It's enough to have certain body features like elongated skulls and tongues. And evolution gives mammals these features. Their teeth often get reduced. That is, they decrease in number and size. They often have strong claws and strong forelimbs, which allow them to dig insect nests. Also, some animals united by their love for ants have lower body temperature and slow metabolism. And what's so special about ants? It's a food rich in protein and fat. They're small, but there are a lot of them, and animals probably feel sated after such a dinner. So, eating ants is like a cheat code for survival in the natural world, which few species know about yet. To discover this phenomenon, scientists conducted a review of more than 600 scientific sources and compiled a database on the eating habits of almost 5,000 species of mammals. Then, they divided these species into 5 categories depending on their diet. Here they are: obligate myrmecophages, carnivores, insectivores, herbivores, and omnivores. After that, biologists placed these categories on the family tree of animals to trace how their eating habits were formed over tens of millions of years. It sounds like a lot of painstaking work. It's worth paying respect to the scientists who are so eager to study our planet. So they noticed that myrmecophagy appeared on the entire tree at least 12 times. It included some animals such as echidnas, pangolins, aardvarks, anteaters, and numbats. And all these animals were in 3 different groups of mammals: eutherians, marsupials, and monotremes. Among those belonging to the first group, there are wolves. Kangaroos belong to the second group, and platypuses go to the third group. And some animals from these groups began to eat ants. And you know what this strange thing is called? Convergence. Convergent evolution is when completely different animal species have common physiological traits that help them solve similar problems and adapt to similar conditions. The opposite process is called divergence. This is when 2 creatures that share a common ancestor become less and less alike over time. For example, a white bear and a gray bear. Their habitats are different, so they've got different features. The white bear became carnivorous. The brown bear is an omnivore. Their sizes and coat colors are different. In addition, the white bear has unique paws that allow it to move on the ice. Convergent evolution is when a bat, a butterfly, and a bird have different ancestors, but in the process of evolution, they all developed wings. The most important thing is that some of you can watch convergent evolution right now at home. Look at pugs and Persian cats. Do you see any similarities? 2 different animals, a cat and a dog. But why did they suddenly become so similar? Flattened skull shape, slightly similar eyes. They got the same features under similar living conditions. And these conditions are our homes and apartments, and our selfish desire to make animals cute. The appearance of pugs and Persian cats is a result of selective breeding made by humans. That's why it's called artificial convergence. Unfortunately, this leads to big health problems in these poor pets. Scientists have scanned about 2,000 skulls of cats and dogs and found similarities in the shape of the skull. So, who knows? Maybe in a couple of million years or earlier, we won't distinguish a domestic cat from a dog at all. Another striking example of convergent evolution is crabs. Yes, for many evolutionary biologists, they're some of the most amazing and complicated creatures on Earth. But what's so complicated about them? They confuse scientists. It seems to you that all crabs are the same, but they represent different groups. That is, some crabs are real crabs and some crabs are not crabs. Okay, this is a little confusing. For example, true crabs are swimmer crabs, mud crabs, and some others. Shell-shy and hermit crabs are so-called false crabs. But what's the difference? They differ in size, but outwardly, they look almost the same. Claws, eyes, walk. The difference is in the legs. True crabs have 4 pairs of long legs, while false crabs have 3 pairs and 1 small pair at the back. Yes, they have a flat, hard shell and bent tails, but their common ancestor didn't have these features. Moreover, over the past 250 million years, evolution has changed the structure and appearance of crabs several times. That is, different creatures, independently of each other, grew this unusual shell. It looks like there's a sample of an ideal shell for living in certain places with water. And different animals get this sample on their backs. And the shell is not the only thing. Scientists have come up with a term that stands for crabinization. It's carcinization. When an animal loses its crab-like form during evolution, it's called decarcinization. Considering all this stuff, a question arises. In the case of anteaters, it's clear why some mammals have elongated muzzles, strong front paws, and long claws. It's easier to get ants with these features. But why has nature made many animals look like crabs? What is the evolutionary advantage of the crab shape? Scientists have several ideas. Carcinization gives animals a hard, calcified shell that protects them from enemies. Walking sideways allows them to be agile and fast. Moving this way, they don't lose sight of the enemy that's chasing them. But there are exceptions here. Spider crabs walk straight, and hermit crabs, which are not real crabs and are not carcinized, walk sideways. Scientists don't have a clear picture and can't name the exact reason for carcinization. But the more genomic information about these creatures we have, the closer scientists are to getting the answer. But why is all this necessary? Well, if researchers can track the evolution of crabs, they will have a timeline of 250 million years. Scientists will be able to understand which environmental factors cause animals to acquire the features of crabs, and which factors take these features away. And most interestingly, scientists will be able to understand which animals will become crabs during convergent evolution. Let's consider whether something similar could happen to the human species. In fact, convergent evolution also touches us. Depending on temperature, atmospheric pressure, and many other factors, people develop different features. For example, residents of high-altitude areas with low oxygen levels have voluminous lungs.
This invisible line divides the world into 2 parts. And most animals, fish, and birds, for some reason, can't cross it. The line is called the Wallace Line, and it runs between Australia and Asia. It has its name after Alfred Russel Wallace, a British scientist and explorer who discovered it in 1859. He traveled to Asia to explore a group of islands called the Malay Archipelago. As Wallace walked through the jungles, climbed hills, and sailed on boats, he noticed something like an invisible wall. On its west side, in places like Borneo and Sumatra, he saw animals you might find in Asia. There were big rhinos munching on leaves and monkeys swinging from tree to tree. The forests were full of life, with all kinds of animals you'd expect to see in a jungle. But in places like Sulawesi and Lombok, just across the imaginary line he came up with, Wallace found animals more like the ones in Australia and colorful birds like cockatoos. The behaviors of animals differ on different sides of the Wallace Line. Some creatures are great at traveling across tough barriers like water, but others are not. For example, bats can fly across open water, but they sometimes cross the Wallace Line. On the other hand, big animals that live on land like elephants usually stay on just one side of the line. Some birds are shy and like to stay hidden in thick bushes and trees to avoid predators. They wouldn't feel safe flying over wide stretches of water with no place to hide. Plants don't stick to the Wallace Line as strictly as animals do, because they spread in their own unique ways, like with seeds carried by the wind, water, or animals. One plant genus, the eucalyptus, mostly stays on the Australian side. But one eucalyptus tree has made its way to the Philippines on the Asian side. Underwater, the Wallace Line doesn't matter as much. The area between the Wallace Line and Australia is called the Coral Triangle, and it's bursting with life. Now, after more than 150 years, scientists think they finally have an explanation of the Wallace Line mystery. They believe it all started about 35 million years ago, when Australia broke away from Antarctica and slowly moved up to crash into Asia. When this happened, the crash created a chain of islands called the Malay Archipelago between Asia and Australia. This caused extreme changes in the weather, which made the area very different and affected which animals could live there. Researchers used a computer model that looked at how more than 20,000 species of animals from both sides of the Wallace Line would have behaved millions of years ago. When Australia started to drift away from Antarctica, it opened up a huge new era of deep ocean around Antarctica. This is where the biggest ocean current on Earth, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, began to flow. This swirling current made the planet's climate much cooler and completely changed how animals could live in different places. But not all animals were affected in the same way. Indonesia stayed warm and rainy, which was perfect for animals from Asia. These creatures could hop from island to island like stepping stones and make their way toward Australia. But animals from Australia had a harder time. Over millions of years, they had gotten used to living in cooler, drier places, so the tropical islands didn't suit them as well. Scientists believe if we can see how animals adapted to big changes in weather patterns millions of years ago, we might be able to predict how today's animals will cope with a similar situation. Other scientists after Wallace also tried to describe and explain the invisible natural border between Asia and Australia, and came up with their lines. The Weber Line, for example, is in a slightly different location than the Wallace Line, between the Oriental and the Australasian faunal regions within Wallacea. It's a group of mainly Indonesian islands that are separated by deep water straits from the Asian and Australian continental shelves. They were never connected to the big continents by land, so animals that could swim, fly, or float across the water made it to these islands. That's why the creatures living there are so unique and come from both Asia and Australia. Weber's line is where the balance tips. If you go one way, most of the animals are from Asia. If you go the other way, most of the animals are from Australia. Another important migration event in the history of our planet happened in the Americas. Around 30 million years ago, South America became a separate landmass as tectonic plates moved and pulled it away from Antarctica and Africa. Once it was on its own, the animals living there started to evolve in unique ways and turned into creatures you couldn't find anywhere else in the world. There were animals we still see today, like opossums, giant rodents like capybaras and chinchillas, armadillos, anteaters, and sloths. Some of the animals from those times are now extinct. There were giant ground sloths, bigger than cars, roaming around. There were glyptodonts, which were like giant armadillos with super tough, bony shells. There were also huge, scary birds that couldn't fly, but could chase down their prey. Up in North America, animals could still travel to other parts of the world through the Bering Strait. So North America was full of different animals like deer, bison, horses, camels, and even mammoths and mastodons. They all lived alongside predators like big cats, wolves, and bears. About 3 million years ago, the continents of North and South America got connected by a strip of land called the Isthmus of Panama. It formed because the tectonic plates shifted again. Some major volcanic activity between 25 million years ago also contributed to the process. Animals started to move between North and South America, and this long process went down in history as the Great American Interchange. During the Ice Age, huge glaciers in the north grew and shrank over tens of thousands of years. When the glaciers were at their biggest, they held so much water that the sea levels dropped, and forests probably turned into wide grassy plains. So animals had the perfect conditions to cross over. Giant ground sloths were among the animals that went up north from South America, all the way to Alaska. One special kind even roamed the chilly tundras alongside woolly mammoths and caribou. Lots of North American predators decided to explore the South. There were cats like cougars, jaguars, and saber-toothed tigers with their giant teeth. Wolves, foxes, otters, raccoons, and bears also joined the migration. The short-faced bear could stand up to 13 feet tall and weigh as much as a small car. South America also had some funny-looking animals called sanus, or South American native ungulates. These were hoofed mammals that evolved into all kinds of weird shapes, while South America was isolated. Big animals from North America, for example, relatives of elephants with strange tusks, came to the south and became some of the largest creatures around. The ancestors of today's llamas settled in the Andes Mountains, and deer, tapirs, and peccaries thrived in the forests. Animals kept moving back and forth between the continents for thousands of years. But as the Ice Age ended, many of the bigger animals, like the giant ground sloths, couldn't adapt and disappeared. It seems North American animals were better at adapting to their new homes. You can find armadillos, porcupines, and opossums from South America in North America. But many of South America's most famous animals like jaguars, llamas, and spectacled bears left North America long ago. Scientists think South America's animals, after being isolated for millions of years, had a harder time dealing with new challenges when their ecosystems changed.
Hair, it's all around you. Tiny, almost invisible, or really, really long. Black, blonde, red, gray, or any color you like. Thick and shiny, hopefully. Shining, gleaming, streaming, flaxen, waxen. You might even try to get rid of some of it, but hair, like the 60s musical on Broadway, keeps coming back. There are a few body parts that aren't covered with hair, like our palms, soles, and lips. Palms would stay the same in a hairless world, but you'd probably have different hands, with no fingernails at all. They're technically hair, they're made of keratin too. Modified hair at your fingertips. No toenails either. If you enjoy mellow bird songs, music, or the sound of the ocean, congrats, you have hair. Sounds weird, but tiny hairs in your ear actually help you hear everything around you. There are tiny hair cells with tiny bristles in the inner ear, and they kind of brush against sensory cells which help detect sound. When you get older, some of these hairs fall out, so it's harder to hear things. But in a hairless world, we'd all be deaf, huh? Those tiny hairs help fluid vibrate inside the inner ear, in the part of the ear called the cochlea. Looks like a snail, right? Ooh, snails in your ear! Inside the cochlea, there are lots of teeny tiny hairs that vibrate together with the fluid and are connected to nerves. But that's not all. The same tiny hairs are responsible for balance. They hang out in the ear canals that are full of fluid. When you move, the fluid moves as well, and this helps you feel where you are in space. With no ear hair, we wouldn't know where down was. So, you can't hear, you can't tell which way is up, and you can forget about walking. You'd need to have someone with hair to guide you. We'd all need guide dogs. Let's do some math. Over 7 billion humans, and only about 900 million dogs in the world. We're gonna need more dogs. We basically use hair every single moment of our life, even when we just breathe. Nose hairs can be pretty annoying. They stick out to say hello and make your nose all itchy. Why not pluck them out? Well, nose hairs are one of the best defenses our bodies have. A world without nose hair would be a totally different place. Your nose is helpless now, poor little thing. You'd inhale a lot of stuff that doesn't belong up there. You're not going to accidentally inhale a pen or a Q-tip. That's not what you have to look out for. They're too big for your nostrils anyway, unless you shove them up there. No, it's dust you'd really need to be afraid of. No safe place for you and your precious nose, not even at home. Without any nose hair, you'd have to wash the floors at least 3 times a day just to avoid choking on dust that you'd normally never even notice. If you want to make a big splash at a birthday party, buy the guest of honor a robotic vacuum. Without nose hair, you'd almost never take off that ski mask that covers your face, complete with detachable transparent shield. You want to go outside? You gotta put it on. You might want to avoid mirrors. You look like an old-school iron welder. It ain't stylish, but it's the best way to protect your face. Even if you went out on a date, you'd always be wearing that thing. And you can forget about bringing flowers. The smell isn't the problem. A hairless world would still smell good or bad. Nose hair doesn't have anything to do with that. Specialized sensory cells in your nose are the ones picking up the scent. It's the pollen that would freak people out. It's game over if that stuff gets in your hairless nose. I'm talking non-stop sneezing. Ugh! So much it makes your abs sore. No more roses on Valentine's Day, people. You'd have no eyelashes either. This one's a big one. You really need them to protect your eyes. Eyelashes are like a knight's shield, effortlessly protecting your eyes from dust and lint. When your eyes are closed, lashes add an extra layer of protection. It's like a fortress. Without them, you might even go blind. But these awesome shields do more than just protect your beautiful eyeballs. They also help keep your eye temperature steady, your very own personal teeny-tiny trees, giving you some sweet shade. If you want a business idea for a new hairless world, choose glasses. You'd make millions. They'd be a must for everyone, sunny, cloudy, whatever. But they'd look more like a scuba mask than those new shades you bought at the mall. They'd have a built-in nose filter, stylish. And they'd be really pricey. Like I said, you'd make millions. Most people would probably stick with their welding shield, cheap but effective. Eyebrows get a bad rap, like they're not that important. Some even pluck them vigorously and end up with 2 super narrow lines. But eyebrows keep sweat away from your eyes, and they're sort of an anti-glare protection. It's pretty easy to solve an eyebrow problem, just pop on that handy mask. But get this, no eyebrows, no emotions. Head over to a mirror. Look angry, look sad, look interested. Your eyebrows are dancing all over the place. But humans are pretty creative. They'd probably start drawing them on. Maybe stylish thin lines, or something more crazy. Flowers, geometric designs. How about 2 black cats sleeping right there on your brow? And you know, some people would be into fake eyebrows, probably made out of faux fur. Might want to stock up on those as well. You could make trillions. Our skin that's covered with hair would suffer too. Those tiny hairs on your arms and legs protect you from all sorts of dust, dirt, and grease. Without them, that stuff would be clogging up your pores, making your skin all greasy. Yuck. The most obvious thing about a hairless world is that we'd all be bald – babies, kids, men, and women. Wigs of all kind would turn into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Hopefully, they'd hire all those out-of-work hairdressers. No more waxing or shaving either, by the way, guys. And no more gray hair. Calm down, Grandpa. Stress, diet, and lifestyle can all contribute to those pesky gray hairs popping out all over your beautiful head. Regular exercise, eating more fruits and vegetables, and lowering your stress levels at work and at home may help you slow down the process, except in a hairless world. It doesn't matter anyway. It might be a lot harder to tell someone's age without hair, especially if we're all walking around with scuba masks on. Our bodies would have to change a lot to adapt and thrive. The main function of our body hair is to keep our body temperature just right. It's called thermoregulation. But since people sweat and hair is the perfect spot for bacteria to thrive, people would smell less. No hair basically means no home for bacteria. Hairless people might actually be better at some sports. Not by much, though. Swimmers who shave their legs are 0.6 to 0.7% quicker than those who don't. We'd also be less prone to injuries. Hairless body parts don't swell up so much after minor bumps or bruises. If our bodies had no hair at all, our skin might be totally different. Without hair to keep our body at the perfect temperature, we'd have to use fat. We'd have to evolve some extra fat under our skin to keep our body temperature steady. And say goodbye to soft and thin skin, we'd probably develop thicker and rougher skin for protection. We probably wouldn't even have goosebumps anymore. They're formed at the base of the hair, so no hair might mean no more goosebumps. We'd have to invent another way of showing a whole bunch of feelings, like if we're cold, frightened, or excited. Hey, maybe our tongues would swell. What if we could change the way we smell instead? Like if we're cold, we'd suddenly smell like pumpkin spice latte. Toasty. And let's spare a thought for all the people left out of our new hairless world. Rapunzel would be stuck up in that tower forever. And what about those slow-mo hair commercials? I'm gonna miss those. Yep, hair today, gone tomorrow. Thanks for everything, hair. Throughout time, scientists have managed to uncover about 6,000 early human fossils, ranging from skulls to teeth. For some of these fossils, it was a breeze. Researchers could instantly identify them as belonging to, say, the Neanderthals. However, when it came to others, things got a bit trickier. Some fossils just didn't fit into any existing categories. So, what categories of prehistoric humans do we actually know about? Well, up until recently, we recognized 8 different species of early humans. One of these is Homo habilis, which means handyman. You'll recall that Homo is Latin for human. They resembled regular primates, but were pivotal in our evolution. They were the first to create stone tools, which significantly aided their daily activities, such as butchering. Next up, we have Homo rudolfensis. These guys were larger than Homo habilis and boasted bigger brains, but they were still quite distant from modern humans. For example, even though the neurological structure of their brains was becoming more complex, they were probably not capable of using any form of actual spoken language. Then came Homo erectus, the first to walk upright, followed by Homo antecessor, which is considered the last common ancestor of modern humans and Neanderthals, along with a host of other Homo species. Meanwhile, we're still piecing together the story of the enigmatic Denisovans. Our knowledge of Homo naledi is pretty limited too, since it was only discovered in 2013, and it is species number 8. Interestingly, Naledi means star in the Sotho language because they were found in a cave called Rising Star. Scientists were taken aback by them. Everything suggested they were around 2 million years old. But after closer examination and some tests, it turns out that the Naledi species is much younger, between 236 and 335,000 years old. Their hands were adapted to making tools, yet no tools have been found nearby. Long story short, they're a puzzling species, and there's still so much more to learn about them. So even though today we have only one human species on our planet, Homo sapiens, we continue to discover ancient species that are long gone. Now you might wonder why researchers study these extinct species. The truth is, they need this knowledge to piece together the intricate narrative of our prehistoric past. In 2024, a significant discovery emerged, the 9th human species, named Homo giluensis, which translates to large-headed. Researchers suggest that this species hunted wild horses, crafted stone tools, and processed animal hides to survive harsh winters. A researcher from the University of Hawaii noted that the discovery of this potential new species came about while his team was developing a novel method for classifying fossil evidence. Interestingly, one potential representative of Homo giluensis isn't entirely new to science. The Denisovans, first identified in 2010 through DNA analysis of a finger bone found in Siberia, have yet to be classified as a distinct species. Some scientists propose that they may actually belong to this newly identified group. These big-headed individuals could help shed light on the long-standing mysteries surrounding these hominin fossils, which have puzzled researchers due to their mixed characteristics of Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. You see, sometimes it's tough to call a spade when you don't even know what a spade looks like. You get the idea? Many unsolved mysteries linger, simply because scientists haven't had this crucial, big-headed piece of the puzzle. So theoretically, we modern humans could also be considered a bit of Homo juluensis. You don't believe me? Well, watch this. We need to consider two key facts for this equation. First, there are the Denisovans, a group we might refer to as Homo juluensis from a scientific perspective. Yeah, this is just a theory proposed by some researchers, but let's roll with it for now and pretend it's a fact. Second, it's important to know that the Denisovans interbred with the ancestors of modern-day Melanesians. These folks inhabit areas ranging from New Guinea to the Fiji Islands and carry between 4 and 6% Denisovan DNA. Now, you might not personally have those genes, unless you've been tested, of course, but the key takeaway here is that there are modern humans today who share genetic links with the Denisovans, or Homo juluensis, or big heads if you prefer. Now, that all sounds pretty plausible. Let's unpack step by step how it happened. Researchers have uncovered this type of ancient human, known as the Denisovans, based on skeletal remains found in Siberia. These ancient humans coexisted and interbred with modern humans, adding yet another layer to our understanding of human evolution. Named after the Siberian caves where their fossils were discovered, the Denisovans are believed to have roamed widely across Eurasia. Evidence indicates that the Denisovans lived alongside Neanderthals and interacted with early Homo sapiens, possibly around 50,000 years ago. A team of scientists successfully sequenced a complete genome from these ancient hominins using nuclear DNA extracted from a finger bone. This discovery reveals that at least 4 distinct human groups existed during the time when anatomically modern humans began migrating out of Africa. Alongside modern humans and Neanderthals, we now have to consider the Denisovans and another small human species from Indonesia, often referred to as the Hobbit, when discussing our evolutionary history. One intriguing question that arises is why Denisovan genes are predominantly found in modern Melanesians, yet absent from other Eurasian populations. Remember that 4 to 6%? One hypothesis suggests that interactions between the Denisovans and early modern humans were limited and brief, especially as humans migrated throughout Southeast Asia into Melanesia. Scientists speculate that only a small number of the Denisovans may have interbred with a larger group of modern humans. This could explain how the Denisovan genes made their way into the gene pool despite the likelihood of infrequent encounters. Anyway, the more scientists dig into our past, the more fascinating things they uncover about our ancestors. Take Neanderthals, for example. Did you know these guys were responsible for creating the very first piece of art ever? I had no idea. But a 2018 study of ancient cave art in Spain revealed what are now considered the oldest known artistic creations. We used to think Neanderthals lacked the cognitive skills needed for art, but it turns out they were actual art pioneers. Not only did they create art, but they also seem to have invented hashtags thousands of years before Chris Messina did it in 2007. Right, I'm kidding, but you'll soon get why I mention hashtags. The artworks found in several caves in Spain include simple hand stencils, a ladder-like drawing, and various other markings. Until recently, these prehistoric pieces were believed to have been made by early humans. But new testing methods suggest they're much older than we thought. Above all, the earliest recognized Neanderthal artwork, which looks like a hashtag, was discovered in Gibraltar back in 2014. To determine the age of these artworks, Scientists employed advanced dating techniques using eHarmony and Match.com. Oops, wait a minute, wrong dating techniques. They actually used uranium and thorium radioisotopes instead of the traditional carbon dating. Once the necessary tests were completed, they confirmed the art was approximately 65,000 years old, 15,000 years older than the previously oldest known art from Indonesia. At that time, the only species around were Neanderthals, so it's safe to say they were behind these creations. Modern humans didn't arrive in Spain until about 20,000 years later. Hey, it was a long commute. That rules them out as the hashtag creators. The hand stencil was likely created intentionally, with the artist preparing the pigment and applying it over their hand. Plus, the caves also contain a collection of painted seashells that are an astonishing 115,000 years old. Some of these shells have been drilled, suggesting they might have been used as jewelry. Some specialists argue that the fact Neanderthals created art hints that they might have also had some form of spoken language. So maybe it's time we fully embrace Neanderthals as part of our lineage. They're humans too, just a different branch of our family tree. While these findings are intriguing, some experts remain skeptical about the new dating methods, claiming they're not entirely convinced. Hey, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. You know, artificial intelligence is so advanced now that it can assist doctors with diagnoses, translate text from any language in real time, and create art. But it still works using the same kind of computer parts made from silicon that have been around since the 1950s. Some scientists and companies decided it's time to step forward and build computers out of living things instead. Ouch! This new field is called biocomputing, and it uses things like tiny clusters of lab-grown cells called organoids to create new kinds of computers. One company in Switzerland called Final Spark has created a special computer platform using human brain organoids to help process information. You can rent this platform online for $500 a month if you're a scientist and want to do some research. The main goal of the company that made the computer is to create AI that uses 100,000 times less energy than the powerful artificial intelligence systems we have today. Each brain organoid the computer uses is very small, only a half a millimeter wide, and there are 4 of them in each processing unit. These organoids are connected to 8 tiny wires, called electrodes, that can send signals to the neurons inside the organoids. These electrodes also connect the organoids to regular computer systems. The neurons in the organoids are given a small amount of dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good, to encourage them to learn. So it's just like what your brain does when you learn something new. Thanks to electrical signals and dopamine rewards, the neurons in the organoids can form new connections, again, much like how your brain works, and mine too, sometimes. If this process works well, these organoids could one day act like the processors in today's computers, except they would do the same kinds of jobs in a much more energy-efficient way. If you want to check out how it all works yourself, the tiny brain-like organoids are being live-streamed 24/7 so anyone can watch what they're doing. The big task for researchers is to figure out how to make the neurons in these organoids do what we want them to do. Scientists from 34 universities have asked to use Final Spark's biocomputers, and the company has already allowed scientists from 9 schools to start working with them. Each team is studying something different about biocomputing. For example, the team at the University of Michigan is exploring how to use electrical and chemical signals to control the organoids, which could help create a special language just for these biocomputers. Scientists at Lancaster University in Leipzig, Germany, are trying to figure out how to make the organoids work with different types of AI learning models. Organoid computers aren't as powerful as the regular silicon ones we use today. There isn't a standard technology to manufacture these tiny brain-like organoids yet. Also, since they're made of living cells, they don't live forever. Right now, Final Spark's organoids last about 100 days, which is a big improvement from the first experiments. They used to only live for a few hours. But the process of creating organoids has become much smoother. The lab currently has between 2,000 and 3,000 organoids. Now, Final Spark isn't the only company trying to find new alternatives to the usual silicon chips. The scientist in Spain studies another kind of biocomputing called cellular computing. It involves using specially modified living cells to create systems that can remember things, make decisions, and work like basic computers do today. The scientists believe that because cellular computers can react to changes in their environment, they could help fix damaged ecosystems. Regular computers can't do much of this, but a biocomputer made of bacteria could be placed in a lake, for example, to give detailed information about the water's health. It would react to different chemicals and conditions. Another scientist from the University of the West of England is exploring how fungi could be used in computing. Fungi have long thread-like structures called mycelia that can send out tiny electrical signals similar to how our brain cells work. The scientist thinks that these fungal networks could be used to create a brain-like computer system that can learn, recognize patterns, and do other smart things. His team has already taught fungal networks to help computers do certain math problems. They believe that using fungi for computing could be better than using brain cells because it's easier, cheaper, more ethical, and works well with current technology. While a computer made of human neurons is in the testing stages, scientists at UC Davis Health have invented a new brain-computer interface that could turn brain signals into speech with nearly perfect accuracy, up to 97%. Scientists put special sensors in the brain of a man who had trouble speaking because of his health condition. When they turned on the system, the man could start sharing what he wanted to say within minutes. When someone with a similar condition wants to speak, the new device turns their brain signals into text that appears on a computer screen. The computer can then say the words out loud. To create this system, the team worked with a 45-year-old man who had a condition that made his arms and legs weak and his speech very difficult to understand, so he needed help to communicate. A doctor planted a special device into the patient's brain. He placed tiny sensors in a part of the brain that helps control speech. These sensors were designed to pick up signals from 256 spots in the brain. The device detects when the brain is trying to move muscles to talk. It listens to the brain signals and turns them into sounds like syllables, which then form the words the person is trying to say. This invention is just one example of the latest trend for computers to be part of the clothes we wear and even part of our bodies. We're making new prosthetic limbs that can do more than just help people grab things. They can also send a message back to the brain, telling them that something has been touched. This changes how we think about being human because it means that even a metal limb can connect to our brain like a real part of us. According to experts, computers of the future will mix together living things, physical objects, and digital technology. Things like 3D printing, biotechnology, robots that help people move, smart devices that connect everything, self-driving cars, and different types of artificial intelligence will be even more widespread than they are now. Things are changing really fast, so it's hard to make predictions about the computer industry even as close as 2030. But experts agree that quantum computing, which brings the science of physics into computers, will be super important. Computers could become so tiny, they're going to be the size of an atom. Quantum computing is expected to make huge changes in how we use AI and machine learning and search through big data. It means we could get even better shopping suggestions and smarter tools for our home. In medicine, it could help discover new medicines faster and help people live longer, healthier lives. Quantum computing will also affect many industries like privacy, finance, healthcare, entertainment, and technology. It could change how we work, leading to new breakthroughs in robotics, better surgical tools, and improved digital tools for our jobs. It will also make technology better, as it should make supply chains more efficient, improve traffic management, help with financial planning, and streamline many different processes. For most of the time we've used computers, everything we do on them happens in 2D, meaning that it's flat, like looking at a picture or reading on a screen. Sometimes, special jobs like 3D modeling or design use 3D, but that's not common for most people. But now, we're starting to move from doing things in 2D to exploring 3D virtual worlds, where things look and feel more like they do in real life. VR gadgets are still pretty expensive and not available to everyone, but big companies are working on extended reality headsets, and this tech will likely become more and more widespread.
The heart continues beating on its own for around 3 minutes after being separated from its owner. It occurs because of a phenomenon called self-excitation, when something generates its own energy. When we appear in this world, we have 300 bones, but with time, some of them fuse, leaving us with around 206 bones. And still, some have extra bones in their skull structures. Those are wormian bones, which are basically extra bone pieces found within the joints of the skull. If you laid flat the respiratory tubes in the lungs, they would cover an area as large as a tennis court, all thanks to 33 generations of branching. The brain is as cool as the lungs. It has 86 billion neurons, nerve cells that send messages all over your body and allow you to do everything from breathing to talking, eating and thinking, or doing sports. The brain also has up to 60 trillion synapses, the places where neurons connect and communicate with one another. That's more than all the leaves on all the trees in the world. And here's another fun fact. Your eyes are like car engines. They need fluids to function properly, just like an engine needs gasoline. So when you blink up to 20,000 times a day, you're basically giving your eyes a windshield wash. Have you ever blushed and felt your cheeks turn red? Well, did you know that your stomach lining can blush too? When you blush, there's an increased blood flow in your body, and that includes your stomach lining. It turns red because it has plenty of blood vessels, and when there's more blood than usual, it shows. Now, we all know that plastic is bad for the environment, but did you know that we can actually digest it in tiny quantities? However, our digestive system can't handle grass. Grazing animals have special teeth and several stomachs to process raw leaves and grass, while we're stuck with just one stomach. We all have 2 super fast muscles that control our eyelids closing. They're actually the fastest muscles in our body, and they shut our eyes within a mere 0.1 second when triggered. And while we still don't know why we blink, we do know that women blink more often than men, and that we tend to blink in unison when watching a movie with friends. Maybe it's just a weird human thing. By the way, every time you eat something, your esophagus, the organ your food travels through to reach the stomach, moves in a series of wave-like contractions, pushing the food forward. This process is called peristalsis. Your fingers don't have any muscles whatsoever. To move them, you involve tendons connected to muscles in your hands and forearms. Some people, around 12% of women and almost no men, have 4 cones in their eyes. This condition is called tetrachromacy. People with this peculiarity can see a whopping 100 million colors. Your body glows, emitting tiny amounts of barely visible light, the product of biochemical reactions going on in your organism. The light intensity changes throughout the day. Unfortunately, you can't detect it with the unaided eye. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects the body's connective tissues, making them more elastic. This can make you unusually tall, have elongated limbs, and often be extremely flexible. And some people use this as an advantage in their careers. Javier Botet was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome at a young age, but he made a name for himself in the horror film industry. He can contort his body in such an eerie and unsettling way that this has landed him roles in numerous films such as Mama, The Conjuring 2, It, and Slender Man. But Marfan syndrome is a spectrum disorder. While some people with the condition can live relatively normal lives, others may face serious health issues. The DEC2 gene mutation is a mutation that allows people to have just a few hours of sleep a night and still feel great. They don't get tired and never sleep in. On average, such people wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. No more than 5% of the world's population has this feature. Human embryos, the initial stage of development for a multicellular organism, have a tail, and it usually disappears before birth, leaving us with a tailbone. In the future, this structure will probably vanish altogether since it has no apparent purpose. People lose 30 to 40,000 skin cells every minute. It adds up to 43 to 57 million skin cells per day. But worry not, the epidermis, the top layer of your skin, replaces itself every 30 days or so. If this process happens faster, it can lead to skin flaking and irritation. The liver is a unique organ. It can regenerate after 60 to 70% is removed. At the same time, its shape may change afterward. It might sound like something out of a comic book, but humans can actually have super strength. Turns out, some accidental mutations can unleash titanic strength without any crazy workout routines. There are two proteins in our body, myostatin and activin A, that usually are secreted by muscle cells to suppress excessive growth. In other words, these two help regulate the size and number of your muscle cells, so you don't end up accidentally looking like Schwarzenegger. But as you can guess, some do end up like that. People with this genetic condition don't produce these proteins. Without hitting the gym, they can naturally grow their muscles extraordinarily large, resulting in super strength. It's called myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy. Sounds kinda dangerous, right? And it is. When you become a Superman, there's also the risk of muscle imbalance, heart and joint issues, and other problems. When you swallow, it takes the food from 5 to 8 seconds to travel from the mouth down to the stomach. Your eyes have 3 kinds of cones: red, blue, and green. Thanks to them, you can perceive around 1 million colors. Your hard-working heart will beat around 2.5 to 3 billion times and pump approximately 100 million gallons of blood in your lifetime. Speaking of your skull, it isn't a solid structure. It consists of 22 bones. 8 of them protect the brain and 14 form the facial skeleton. And since we're on the topic of the human head, the part of your brain that's responsible for vision is in the back of your head. Interestingly, the right side of your brain controls the vision on the left side, and vice versa. Breathing isn't only about moving the air inside and outside. It's about the way you do it, because it can literally affect your face shape. If you breathe through your nose, you'll get well-defined cheekbones over time. It will also make your face wider because your tongue will exert force against your jaw. If you breathe through your mouth, your tongue won't have a place to rest. It will change your facial structure as time goes by. Your face can be more narrow and your cheekbones won't be that visible. Also, if you're a mouth breather, you'd probably tend to tilt your head backwards more. This way, you increase cranial contents in the back part of your brain and directly change your entire posture, along with the shape of your neck and face. It's possible to taste your food without saliva. That's because the chemicals in your food must be dissolved in saliva before they get detected by your taste buds. By the way, each of your taste buds works as a mini-computer. It consists of up to 100 cells that analyze taste information. Anyway, speaking of food, eating too many carrots can indeed make your skin orange because of the high amounts of beta-carotene this vegetable contains. If you have too much of this compound in your bloodstream, it'll gather in parts of your body with thicker skin, such as the soles of your feet, knees, elbows, palms, and even certain areas around your nose. But you can easily reverse this condition by eating fewer carrots. The chin muscles, aka the mentalis muscles, look like creepy, tiny tentacles. And still, they make it possible for you to create different facial expressions involving the lips, chin, and cheeks. Your small intestine is actually not so small. It's taller than you are, measuring from 9 to 16 feet. The cornea, that transparent front cover on your eyes, doesn't have any blood supply. It receives oxygen directly from the air. Our lungs are the only organs that can float on the water. All because they're made up of around 300 million balloon-like structures called alveoli. Your bones are 4 times harder than concrete. The strongest bone in your body is the femur. It can support up to 30 times the weight of a grown-up person. Even crazier is that our bones are made up of composite material, meaning they're both hard and elastic at the same time. The outer layer of your skin is thicker on your feet than on other parts of your body. The heart has its own electrical system and can continue beating even when it's disconnected from the body. The average lifespan of one eyebrow hair is 4 months. We spend 40% of our life with our eyes closed. Most of that time is when we're sleeping, but don't forget to count blinking too, or while driving. In an adult, the blood makes up 7 to 8% of the total body weight. About 55% of your blood is liquid plasma. The rest is red and white blood cells and platelets. They form clots and prevent bleeding. The density of your brain increases throughout your whole life, all because new neural connections pop up. And they appear because the structure of your brain keeps changing too. The same process of changing will occur to your feet too. They're likely to become bigger with time. When people grow older, ligaments and tendons in their feet weaken. This makes the arches flatter and feet become wider and longer. People who live to be 110 years and older have more immune cells, called T helpers, than the average person. These cells are likely to protect them from viruses and other health problems. The human brain is sometimes called a random thought generator for a reason. More than 48 thoughts appear in your brain in just 1 minute. It's almost 3,000 thoughts per hour and 69,000 per day. You know these before and after makeovers? Well, if you saw a pic of an average human who lived about 1 million years ago, compare it to a pic of an average human who lives today, you'd be astonished. And get this, it's a makeover performed by Mother Nature. Like back in the day, the earliest human species were basically tiny with long arms and short legs. They needed a big digestive tract to handle all those plants they were chowing down on, and their rib cages were super wide to make room for all the organs breaking down their food. Time went by and some of these humans started adapting to hot climates, and they all got narrow and leggy to stay cool. They started eating meat and other quick-to-digest foods, which meant they could have smaller digestive tracts and use more energy for their tall bodies and big brains. And when humans spread to colder climates, they evolved short, wide bodies to conserve heat. But they still love their raw meat and cooked food, which could be easily processed in a short digestive tract. Check out this skeleton of an 8 to 9-year-old Homo erectus kid from East Africa. He was already 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 106 pounds. If he had grown up, he could have been almost 6 feet tall. His lean body was perfect for hot, dry environments. And then there were the Neanderthals, who were only about 5 foot 4 inches tall on average. They had short, broad bodies that were great for dealing with winter cold and even ice ages. Speaking of the brain, it can decide what sounds to focus on when you're in a loud place. Thanks to this ability, you can shut out all other voices and concentrate on the person you're listening to. In most cases, hiccups are harmless and resolve by themselves within a couple of minutes. But if you want to avoid this condition, you should know that it might occur because of temperature changes. There's a bond between your digestive system and your brain, the gut-brain axis. This is the main reason why stress or brain issues can affect the way your body digests food. These days, humans have softer diets and, consequently, smaller jaws. That's why wisdom teeth aren't really necessary, and around 20% of people don't have all 4 of them. The vomeronasal organ helps some animals detect pheromones. Some have vestigial VNO too, but it's mostly non-functional and is likely to disappear with time. You flex that strong handshake and think it's all because of your gym grind? Ha! Turns out your pinky finger is the real MVP. No joke. Believe it or not, that little finger packs a punch and is responsible for 50% of your hand strength. Who knew the underdog could be such a powerhouse? Your toes are like 2 little homies that carry almost half of your body weight. And don't even listen to people who say you don't need them. Your toes are the most important guys when it comes to walking and pushing you forward. Our hair color is easily explained by genes. There are not more than 2% of people with natural red hair. They're followed by blondes, about 3%, and by all the varieties of brown shades, only about 11%. The vast majority goes to black hair, including very dark brown. Who knew that nails had a secret talent besides helping us pick up tiny objects and peel off stickers? They also give us a structure to press against so we know how firmly to hold anything. Talk about multi-talented. Move over, Rapunzel. It's not just our hair and nails that can grow. Our liver can regenerate itself from just 51% of its original size back to full size. But don't go damaging it too much, or you'll end up with scars.
In the future, people are likely to change due to extensive use of technology. So we might have text claws, cramping from gadget use, and 90-angle elbows from holding our devices. Besides, there's a theory that humans are likely to get smaller to conserve energy in our increasingly crowded world. Your body maintains a very careful water balance, and if it loses just 1% of water, you start feeling thirsty. Your brain can process up to 1,000 words per minute while you're reading. Rapid eye movements, saccades, help us absorb information more quickly. As for your tongue, together with your lips and teeth, it allows you to say more than 90 words per minute using over 20 various movements. Your body constantly converts food into energy. 1 calorie is equal to around 4,200 joules. And that's how much you need to change the temperature of 2.2 pounds of water by 1 Kelvin. People have as many hairs on their bodies as chimpanzees. The only difference is that human body hair is mostly useless and so fine that it's almost impossible to see.
Who would have thought that tomatoes have more genes than humans? But don't worry, it's not the number of genes that matters. It's how they all work together. So go ahead and enjoy that tomato sauce on your pizza. Hold your nose the next time you eat and see how much your taste buds fade. It turns out that the nose is actually responsible for 75 to 95% of our taste perception. So don't underestimate the power of those sniffers. Keep your mouth hydrated or your taste buds won't work properly. Saliva triggers chemical reactions with enzymes that break down the food as soon as it enters your mouth. So drink up and savor those flavors. Forget about distinguishing between 10,000 smells. Recent research shows that we can actually differentiate between over 1 trillion smells. And not only that, but smells can evoke some distant memories too. So next time you catch a whiff of something familiar, take a moment to reminisce. When you're snoozing away, your sense of smell goes on vacation too. So even if your room smells like a dumpster fire, you won't even notice it. Sweet dreams, right? And speaking of dreams, did you ever wonder why some of them are in black and white, while others are like a rainbow explosion? Well, apparently it all depends on the TV you watched as a kid. So I guess your grandparents had some pretty boring dreams, huh?
Chromesthesia is seeing colors when you're listening to music. It's a kind of synesthesia, a phenomenon when people have several senses mixed. Some of them perceive numbers in different colors. Others can taste words. People have more than 5 basic senses. Don't forget about the sense of space, the sense of pain, the sense of balance and time, the sense of temperature around and in the body, and many others. Your teeth are the only part of your body that can't repair itself, but the enamel which covers them is one of the toughest things in the human body. After growing several human taste cells in the lab, scientists found out that they had an ability to smell. In each of them, there were a few molecules similar to the ones found in the cells in your nose. Apparently, our senses of smell and taste are even more connected than we thought before.
Now let's talk about listening to your heart. Not only is it a great metaphor for following your dreams, but it can also give you away if you're lying. Yeah, your heart rate starts racing like Usain Bolt when you're fibbing. Okay, brace yourself for this one. Even if you brush your teeth like a champ and use mouthwash like it's going out of style, your mouth is still a germ hotspot. Gross, right? But don't worry, most of those bacteria are actually good for us and keep the bad stuff away. But wait, there's more. The belly button is actually the second dirtiest place on our bodies. Yeah, I know, who knew? Since we don't really use it after we're born, it becomes a breeding ground for all kinds of icky stuff. It's got over 2,300 bacterial species living in there. So maybe it's time to give our belly buttons some extra TLC.
There's an amazing place in Ethiopia, East Africa, called Hadar. This place is a treasure trove. We found tons of old animal fossils there. And among those remnants, we discovered something very special, the fossils of a creature called Australopithecus afarensis. One of these guys was found almost complete. You might know it today by the name Lucy, after a famous song by the Beatles. Lucy was a small lady, only about as tall as a kitchen counter. She lived 3.2 million years ago and became a huge celebrity when we found her in 1974. She helped us learn more about our early ancestors, creatures called Australopithecines. Around 10 to 12 million years ago, there was a group of animals that broke into two branches. One of the branches led to modern apes, while the other led to humans. This separation happened because one group decided to stay in trees and became what we now call gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans. They moved around using all four limbs and lived in forests. But the other group decided to live on the ground and try walking on two legs. Because of that, their brains started getting bigger over time. And over millions of years, they became bald monkeys who watch videos on YouTube. Yeah, you know who you are. Lucy, like other Australopiths, was a bit different from us. She still looked like an ape and lived during a transitional stage. She could walk on two legs, but didn't do it all the time. Sometimes she climbed trees, just like a monkey. She and her buddies were the first step in human evolution. Then came a new branch of evolution, Homo habilis, or handyman. They were the first members of the Homo genus because they were the ones to start developing stone tools and first show human creativity. They probably used these tools for scavenging and processing food. We found the first clues about them back in the 1960s. They walked around East Africa about 3 million years ago. They were pretty small, about 4 feet 7 inches tall. They didn't climb trees anymore and mostly walked on the ground. Their skull shape already resembled ours, unlike the more pear-shaped heads of Australopiths. That's because they had larger brains. After them, we had Homo erectus, the upright man. They lived about 2 million to 70,000 years ago. The name hints that this was the first hominin species that walked on two legs almost all the time. They were also the first to migrate out of Africa, spreading to Asia and Europe. And here, we had the real breakthrough. Representatives of Homo erectus had even larger brains and learned to make more creative and advanced tools. They created the first choppers, cleavers, and hammers and used flakes as scrapers and knives. They probably used a lot of things, wood, bark, and even grass to make the first strings and ropes. With all that, they learned how to hunt large animals and probably hunted together a lot. They were also the first ones to start using fire, which changed our history forever. Over time, more Homo species emerged, including the famous Neanderthals. They're known for their European roots. They split from our common ancestor around 400,000 years ago. Now, even though we share one common ancestor, we didn't evolve from Neanderthals. They were a separate branch. All Neanderthals went extinct, but our evolutionary branch coexisted with them a long time ago. Neanderthals were resourceful, hunting both land and sea creatures. They left behind thousands of stone tools and even decorated caves with paintings. They had their own ceremonies, too. They started to bury those who passed away. They probably noticed that leaving them in the wild leads to spreading diseases and attracting scavengers. But they also showed care and love in their burial rituals. Then it was time for archaic Homo sapiens. They lived around 500,000 to 200,000 years ago, emerging in Africa and Europe. This was the last leg between our ancestors and our modern species, Homo sapiens. The brain just kept getting bigger. They started to show more complex behaviors, not only burial and interesting stone tools, but also smart hunting strategies and planning for the future. They probably had a diverse diet that included both hunting and gathering. And finally, we reached the anatomically modern Homo sapiens. They emerged around 200,000 years ago in Africa. They had a similar skeletal structure and brain size to modern humans, and their behavior was pretty close to ours. They had complex social structures, started thinking in symbols, and so on. They migrated out of Africa around 60,000 years ago, spreading across the globe and eventually replacing other hominin species, such as Neanderthals. They started to create their first languages and form their first words. The first words were probably very simple, like "ah" to call someone and "ma" for babies. After evolving into our final stage, we started advancing in our cultural and technological development. This development became very rapid over the last 200,000 years. About 12,000 years ago, the Neolithic period, also known as the New Stone Age, began. It marked the end of the glacial period. Humans started living in settled villages instead of constantly moving around. This change was brought about by the advent of agriculture, which allowed people to grow crops and raise animals like goats and sheep. Early humans started to domesticate animals, such as sheepdogs, for herding. We also started making the first art, leaving famous drawings in caves, handprints, animals, mostly cows, hunting, and many others. We even created the first currency. We began using clay tokens for transactions. This marked the beginning of commerce and the use of money. And finally, we started writing. And now the events could be recorded and passed down through written records. This is when history officially began. From that point on, we saw the development of agriculture, the rise of complex societies, the invention of writing and the wheel, and the emergence of civilizations. Our tools became more and more sophisticated, languages appeared, leading to the diverse cultures and societies seen today. So, why have we stopped evolving? The truth is, we haven't. Human evolution is an ongoing process, although it's not as dramatic as it used to be. We adapt to different environments, have different skin tones, appearances, body sizes, and genetic mutations that have influenced traits like lactose intolerance or resistance to certain diseases. But the world we live in today is very different from the one our ancestors inhabited. We don't suffer as much because we've developed technology, culture, and social systems. Thanks to this, evolution slowed down, seeing that we're doing okay as we are now. What we started experiencing is cultural evolution rather than a physical one. Plus, 200,000 years is a pretty short time period, considering the time span of the universe or even of our Earth. We should see what happens to us in hundreds of thousands of years. I won't be around then, but there are some theories about that. There's a big idea that, in the future, humans and machines might merge into one super being. We call it technological singularity, a state where we humans lead our technologies to the point where we won't be able to control their development anymore. For example, if AI gets so advanced, it will change everything about how we live. Despite the current rise of AI, we shouldn't be too worried about it taking over the world, at least not in the next few decades. All we've developed now is weak artificial intelligence, little simulations. They might look scary to those who don't know much about AI, but the truth is, they have yet far to go before they reach the grand complexity of the human brain, not to mention consciousness. However, many people believe it's only a matter of time before AI reaches this level of intelligence, and then our world might change forever. There are other possibilities too. For example, one day we might reach a level where we merge with machines and learn to upload our consciousness in the cloud. In that case, we might become a hive mind, taking over the internet using our brains, becoming one giant consciousness. No matter what happens in the future, one thing's certain: technology is changing fast, and it's going to affect all of us sooner or later.
Take a look at your fingernails. Are they a bit ridged? There are a bunch of reasons why that might happen, and it has nothing to do with your manicure skills. To start with, know that your fingernails might be a good indicator of any health problems, but those vertical ridges are normal, especially when you get older. It's your skin's way of showing it needs to slow down. New skin cells don't get produced as rapidly as they used to, so you get this texture on your fingernails. However, if this is just one of many other weird symptoms, it might be more than just a sign of aging. For instance, it may be a sign of a chemical imbalance, which can give you vertical ridges, but also make your nails look spoon-shaped.
Don't put stuff in your ear. You know that. Even with Q-tips, you should always be gentle when using it. Otherwise, you could end up causing more harm. What's even more interesting is that sticking things in your ear can trigger a weird coughing mechanism, also known as the Arnold's ear cough reflex. Turns out that the ear has a say in coughing because of the vagus nerve, this long nerve road from the brain to the belly. It taps the ear, handles the voice box, and takes a detour to the stomach. This nerve runs all sorts of daily activities without us being able to control it, from speaking to eating, and even bathroom breaks. Now, the part that connects it with the ear is Arnold's nerve. This one deals with touch sensations. Stick something in your ear and it can get triggered. And it's precisely that tickle sensation that can make you cough. Think of it as a brain blip, tricking your body into believing it's got something in the throat. You end up coughing as a way to kick out the imaginary intruder. You might be missing a muscle in your arm too, but it's okay. You are most likely born that way, and you're also one of many. It's called the palmaris longus tendon, and about 14% of the population doesn't have it. Here's how you can test it out. Gently flex your wrist and touch your pinky with your thumb. If you can see a little tendon protruding on the inside of your wrist, you've got it. If you don't, that's fine. For the most part, this muscle doesn't increase the performance of our arm. Here's another little experiment you can safely try at home. Check which one of your nostrils is your favorite, even though you probably didn't even know you had one. Stand in front of a mirror, breathe out through your nose, and watch how the fog forms. Sure, there will be 2 marks on the mirror, but for most people, one's gonna be bigger. That's because we usually breathe more from one nostril at a time. Some doctors say that about 75% of our breath comes from one single nostril. It also switches sides during the day, in a process called the nasal cycle. So why not both nostrils at once? Well, it's generally believed to be all about moisture, preventing one side from getting too dry. The only time you might be able to notice the difference is when you're trying to fall asleep. Lie on your right side, and you'll see that gravity makes one part of your nose work harder. Speaking of sleep, whenever you're trying to get some rest at a new place, only a part of your brain will actually get some quality sleep. That's because our brains are wired to remain a bit more alert when we're in an unfamiliar place. This discovery explains why we often wake up feeling groggy after a night in a new apartment. This is a feature we share with birds and sea creatures who can half sleep, keeping an eye out. Back in the day, sleep researchers noticed this and named it the first night effect. Whenever someone participated in a sleep study, they noticed the quality of their rest was so bad they had to trash the data. But after the first night, it seemed to level up. We do this because back in ancient times, the chances of getting attacked by predators during the night were way higher. So it made sense to keep that part of the brain on guard for any dangers. Unfortunately, there's no switch to flip this off. So after a night in a new place, just know you'll need way more coffee. And maybe hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our newest videos for a nice pick-me-up in those snoozy days. It's possible that each time you're getting ready for a workout, your heart is already acting up, even though you aren't technically moving your muscles yet. That's because of an effect called anticipatory rise. In simple terms, it's like your brain is sending directions to your heart, telling it to get ready. These directions come in the form of chemicals, like noradrenaline and adrenaline. It's helpful because that kick in heart rate means more blood pumping out every minute, which is good for your muscles. The increased blood flow delivers oxygen and prepares your muscles to put in the required effort. The better shape your heart's in, the smoother this whole process goes. All of us have heard stories about regular people being able to lift heavy objects in stressful situations. You know, like a mom being able to lift a car to save her kid. Some are calling it hysterical strength. And it can't really be tested out in a lab because you can't just fake a sense of imminent danger. It's more about real, spontaneous moments that somehow trigger this hidden superpower. Well, even though it sounds like people are lifting a ton of weight, they're not that strong.
Take the classic car lift scenario. You'd think they're lifting the whole car, but it's more like lifting a part of it. Most wheels are still on the ground. Plus, cars aren't evenly heavy everywhere. The engine's the densest part, not the area that's often being lifted. As for the hysterical strength, it's more about realizing we're stronger than we think. Our muscles usually use the least effort needed for everyday tasks. But when we need to go all out, we can recruit more muscle power. You see, our bodies are very efficient. Why use all our muscles when lifting a coffee cup? Even when we feel exhausted, chances are we're not. Researchers say we might only use 60 to 80% of our muscle strength, and that's reserved for top athletes. Apart from efficiency, our brains also don't go full power on our muscles because of a built-in safety mechanism. If we used all our strength, we could easily hurt ourselves. The simple game of peekaboo isn't just a fun pastime for babies. They love it so much because it can help with their development. You see, it's not just about covering and uncovering faces. It helps them better master the skill of visual tracking. It's also useful for understanding the concept of object permanence. Just because they can't see something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's gone forever. This knowledge that objects exist even if they're out of sight will increase their problem-solving skills when they get older. Playing peekaboo is also a good way to exercise various positive emotions. They go from surprise to anticipation to excitement and happiness. Some say they can do just fine with just 4 hours of sleep every night. But scientists say most of us adults need a good 6 to 8 hours. And the reality is that anything less than this average can lead to serious sleep deprivation. That is, of course, if you're not one of those super sleepers. These people are magical beings who thrive on less than 6 hours of sleep each night. They function properly on that little, but they also naturally wake up after just 4 or 5 hours. Only 1 to 3% of the population can claim that title. Also, no, it's genetic. You can't train yourself to be one.
You know when you have a stuffy nose and all you can think about are the nights you've taken smooth breathing for granted? Our bodies do a lot of work to keep us comfortable every day. So, in the spirit of staying grateful, let's take a look at a couple of these amazing things the human body does every minute. Starting with our eyes, which are constantly relaying loads of visual info to the brain. The cornea acts like an entrance gate, skillfully bending light. The iris, or the colorful part, adjusts the light dose, and the lens focuses the rest onto the retina. This last one then transforms all that light into electrical signals that are sent to the brain for interpretation. Sounds like a lot of work, but it all gets done in milliseconds. This means that in just a single minute, our brain handles somewhere around 600 million bits of visual data. More than half our bodies are made of water. 55% if you're a lady and 65% if you're a gentleman, to be precise. To make sure this water balance is always in check, our bodies come equipped with a hydration monitor. It's always looking into how much water we're losing through things like sweating or even breathing. If as little as 1% of the water quantity goes missing, we'll start to feel thirsty. We also wouldn't be here if it weren't for those hearts pumping in our chests. Well, actually, just one heart per person. The speed at which it pumps can change depending on how fit you are, your feelings, your size, and even if you're doing a new yoga pose that requires a bit more effort. On average, doctors say adults have anywhere between 60 to 100 heartbeats per minute when they're resting. Now, the fitter you get, the less pressure you put on your heart, and you might even end up having a heart rate as low as 40 beats per minute. Each time this organ gets a little thump, it's pushing about 2.4 ounces of blood around your body. If your resting heart rate is 80 beats per minute, your heart's pushing 1.5 gallons of blood every 60 seconds. Ever wonder how fast your body bounces back after losing blood? We've got on average about 10 pints of it in our adult bodies. When one of them is lost, our bodies start working hard to replace it. And it's faster than you'd imagine. Within 24 hours, the volume loss is replaced. And within a few weeks, we're as good as new. That's because every second, our bodies make some 2 million fresh red blood cells. That's 120 million every minute. When it comes to white blood cells and platelets, the process is even faster. Our breathing mechanism is fascinating too. For grown-ups, the regular breath count is about 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Infants, however, have a faster rate of 30 to 60 breaths per minute. When you take in air, it requires the effort of an entire team. Your brain's command center sends signals down to your diaphragm, telling it to flatten out. Your ribs and abdominal muscles adjust to allow your chest to expand, pulling the air into your lungs. Breathing out is a bit easier. Your used-up air gets pushed out by your elastic lungs. But when you're putting in a bit more effort, that's when your abs help a bit more in the exhale process. Now, when it comes to reading, our brains can amp up that skill, sometimes reaching up to 1,000 words per minute. If you do the math, it means your brain can read a 300-page book in just 2.5 hours. One interesting feature about how our brain processes reading is that it doesn't necessarily do it in a straight line. In fact, our eyes do these unique movements called saccades. They're quick jumps across the text back and forth. Sometimes it's a big leap, other times a tiny hop. They help us soak in tons of information fast, and they happen a bunch of times every second. How big or small the jump is depends on how good we are at reading and how familiar we are with the topic at hand. Do you want to find out more about a variety of topics, like science, pop culture, or history? Well, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with our latest videos. Our skin is the largest organ we own, and is perpetually shedding around 30,000 cells every 60 seconds. Most of the time we don't even notice, but our faces and bodies are constantly removing layers. Yep, a lot of that dust around your house is you. It's a month-long journey for those fresh skin cells to pop up to the surface, and that process speeds up or slows down with age. During our 60s, or even later, it can take up to 8 weeks for cell turnover, and that buildup of skin makes your complexions look a bit dull. Thankfully, there are a lot of products we can use these days to help with dry skin, like moisturizers and serums. You can't talk without your tongue. Well, you can technically, but most people won't understand a word you're saying. On any day, our tongue teams up with our lips and teeth to turn throat sounds into words that make sense. The tongue itself is flexible and speedy, capable of letting out more than 90 words a minute, using a variety of over 20 moves. While we can vocalize without using the tongue, we need it to pronounce consonants like T, D, L, and R, or if you're a pirate, R. This important organ is the same reason parrots can so easily imitate us, though most of them have no idea what they're saying. These birds have a thick tongue, and even though they've got fewer muscle moves, it helps them mimic human speech quite accurately. So, be careful what you say around them. Humans also blink 15 to 20 times each minute. It might not sound like a lot, but it does mean we're spending about 10% of our awake time with our eyes shut. For many years, scientists believed that blinking served a single purpose: to keep our eyes moist. That's mostly why we produce tears, by the way. And with the help of our eyelids, this creates a little cover for the whole eyeball, preventing it from feeling itchy. However, blinking does more. A study from the past decade pointed out that when we blink, our brain hits a mini reset button. It powers down some parts linked to vision and attention. And since attention messes with how we perceive time, blinks could be like these time travel moments for our brains, or mini power naps if you like. Now, on average, people have around 35 to 48 thoughts per minute. It depends on a variety of things, like what we've been through, how we're feeling, and even where we are. When it comes to thought formation, we do know that brain cells can communicate. But understanding exactly how our ideas pop up in our minds is still a bit of a mystery. Our brain features many neurons, these fascinating cells shooting out electrical charges to talk to each other. It's these neurons that spill out brain chemicals called neurotransmitters. Think of it as passing notes that create electric signals, and as these signals surf through thousands of neurons, like a wave, thoughts pop up in our heads. Now, each time you munch on a snack, you're fueling up this power plant, which is your body. One single calorie from your food is around 4,200 energy units called joules. If you're eating 2,000 calories a day, you're transforming that into almost 6,000 joules every minute. And here's how everything happens. After you eat, the food follows its journey through your mouth, down into your stomach, and makes its way into small pieces in your bloodstream. Imagine tiny delivery trucks carrying oxygen and other useful substances to your cells. Once inside, these cells have many factories inside called mitochondria. They're responsible for turning those deliveries into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. This is our cell's energy currency. It's used to make more cells, it helps us move, or even send messages through electrical impulses to other cells. Come to think of it, this sure makes me want to be nicer to my body for all it does. How about you?
You know these before and after makeovers? Well, if you saw a pic of an average human who lived about 1 million years ago compared to a pic of an average human who lives today, you'd be astonished. And get this, it's a makeover performed by Mother Nature. Like back in the day, the earliest human species were basically tiny with long arms and short legs. They needed a big digestive tract to handle all those plants they were chowing down on, and their rib cages were super wide to make room for all the organs breaking down their food. Time went by and some of these humans started adapting to hot climates, and they all got narrow and leggy to stay cool. They started eating meat and other quick-to-digest foods, which meant they could have smaller digestive tracts and use more energy for their tall bodies and big brains. And when humans spread to colder climates, they evolved short, wide bodies to conserve heat, but they still loved their raw meat and cooked food, which could be easily processed in a short digestive tract. Check out this skeleton of an 8 to 9-year-old Homo erectus kid from East Africa. He was already 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 106 pounds. If he had grown up, he could have been almost 6 feet tall. His lean body was perfect for hot, dry environments. And then there were the Neanderthals, who were only about 5 foot 4 inches tall on average. They had short, broad bodies that were great for dealing with winter cold and even ice ages. Junk food is bad for our teeth, but did you know that it can also cause dental crowding? Back in the day, our ancestors had straight teeth with wisdom teeth. But thanks to processed diets and milling technologies, our jaws have shrunk and our teeth are now vying for limited space. So, if you want to avoid a mouthful of crooked teeth, stick to a less processed diet. As humans spread out and adapted to different environments, they changed their body shapes to survive. And as diets changed, so did bodies. But one thing's for sure, early humans were super active, with thicker and stronger bones than we have today. Nowadays, we're evolving sleeker and weaker bones thanks to our less physically demanding lifestyles. Yeah, it's cool to see how much we changed over time. Humans were cool back in the day, but they're probably even cooler now. You may not know it, but your bones are like supermodels. They're designed to be used all the time, and they look pretty good too. But guess what's even stronger? Your teeth. When you bite down, your teeth can exert a whopping 5,600 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's some serious chomping power. Speaking of bones, did you know that they're made up of water? Yep, about 25% of your bone mass is actually H2O. And here's another fun fact. Your eyes are like car engines. They need fluids to function properly, just like an engine needs gasoline. So when you blink up to 20,000 times a day, you're basically giving your eyes a windshield wash. Have you ever blushed and felt your cheeks turn red? Well, did you know that your stomach lining can blush too? When you blush, there's an increased blood flow in your body, and that includes your stomach lining. It turns red because it has plenty of blood vessels, and when there's more blood than usual, it shows. Now, we all know that plastic is bad for the environment, But did you know that we can actually digest it in tiny quantities? However, our digestive system can't handle grass. Grazing animals have special teeth and several stomachs to process raw leaves and grass, while we're stuck with just one stomach. We all have two super fast muscles that control our eyelids closing. They're actually the fastest muscles in our body, and they shut our eyes within a mere 0.1 second when triggered. And while we still don't know why we blink, we do know that women blink more often than men, and that we tend to blink in unison when watching a movie with friends. Maybe it's just a weird human thing. You flex that strong handshake and think it's all because of your gym grind? Ha! Turns out your pinky finger is the real MVP. No joke. Believe it or not, that little finger packs a punch and is responsible for 50% of your hand strength. Who knew the underdog could be such a powerhouse? Your toes are like two little homies that carry almost half of your body weight. And don't even listen to people who say you don't need them. Your toes are the most important guys when it comes to walking and pushing you forward. Our hair color is easily explained by genes. There are not more than 2% of people with natural red hair. They're followed by blondes, about 3%, and by all the varieties of brown shades, only about 11%. The vast majority goes to black hair, including very dark brown. Who knew that nails had a secret talent besides helping us pick up tiny objects and peel off stickers? They also give us a structure to press against so we know how firmly to hold anything. Talk about multi-talented. Move over, Rapunzel. It's not just our hair and nails that can grow. Our liver can regenerate itself from just 51% of its original size back to full size. But don't go damaging it too much, or you'll end up with scars. Did you know that the skin is the largest organ in our body? It makes up a whopping 15% of our total body weight. And if you shed more than your fluffy cat Snowball, don't worry, it's normal. We lose up to 9 pounds of skin cells every year. Gross, but fascinating. Who would have thought that tomatoes have more genes than humans? But don't worry, it's not the number of genes that matters. It's how they all work together. So go ahead and enjoy that tomato sauce on your pizza. Hold your nose the next time you eat and see how much your taste buds fade. It turns out that the nose is actually responsible for 75 to 95% of our taste perception. So don't underestimate the power of those sniffers. Keep your mouth hydrated or your taste buds won't work properly. Saliva triggers chemical reactions with enzymes that break down the food as soon as it enters your mouth. So drink up and savor those flavors. Forget about distinguishing between 10,000 smells. Recent research shows that we can actually differentiate between over 1 trillion smells. And not only that, but smells can evoke some distant memories too. So next time you catch a whiff of something familiar, take a moment to reminisce. When you're snoozing away, your sense of smell goes on vacation too. So even if your room smells like a dumpster fire, you won't even notice it. Sweet dreams, right? And speaking of dreams, did you ever wonder why some of them are in black and white, while others are like a rainbow explosion? Well, apparently it all depends on the TV you watched as a kid. So I guess your grandparents had some pretty boring dreams, huh? Now let's talk about listening to your heart. Not only is it a great metaphor for following your dreams, but it can also give you away if you're lying. Yeah, your heart rate starts racing like Usain Bolt when you're fibbing. Okay, brace yourself for this one. Even if you brush your teeth like a champ and use mouthwash like it's going out of style, your mouth is still a germ hotspot. Gross, right? But don't worry, most of those bacteria are actually good for us and keep the bad stuff away. But wait, there's more. The belly button is actually the second dirtiest place on our bodies. Yeah, I know, who knew? Since we don't really use it after we're born, it becomes a breeding ground for all kinds of icky stuff. It's got over 2,300 bacterial species living in there. So maybe it's time to give our belly button some extra TLC. What do Paris Hilton and Chris Hemsworth have in common? Well, apparently, they both want to bring animals back to life. But we're not talking about making your favorite pet live forever. Nope. These celebs are actually helping a science company bring back animals that no longer exist, like the mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and even the iconic dodo. If everything goes according to plan, these fascinating creatures could be walking among us again by 2028. This groundbreaking effort is led by a company called Colossal Biosciences. At this very moment, they're working on a way to revive the core genes of animals that disappeared from Earth ages ago. The idea is to replicate those genes using DNA from a close, living relative. If that's all Greek to you, don't worry. We'll break it down a bit later. So, the mammoth is one of the animals they plan to bring back, and people are especially hyped about it. These incredible, massive creatures roamed parts of Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America until about 4,000 years ago. Some people might mix them up with modern elephants, but there are some key differences. For starters, they had huge curved tusks that curled inward and were used to dig for food. They also adapted to survive in freezing climates, like having 2 layers of thick fur to keep their blood warm. But mammoths and elephants do have a lot in common. The woolly mammoth shares 99.5% of its genes with its closest relative, the Asian elephant. That's huge because it means that mammoths are genetically closer to Asian elephants than Asian elephants are to African elephants, for example. The company's bold plan is to create a living, walking elephant-mammoth hybrid that looks just like the ones that used to roam the planet. This animal will look like, walk like, and even sound like a woolly mammoth, but most importantly, it'll be able to live in the same ecosystem that the mammoth left behind. If the scientists succeed in bringing back enough of these creatures, one of their big goals is to help restore the Arctic tundra ecosystem. But how do they actually plan to create the mammoth? Here's their plan. First, they need to find well-preserved samples of woolly mammoths in places like Alaska, for example. Then they'll need to sequence the mammoth's genome and the genome of its closest relative, the Asian elephant. The next step is to identify the important genes that made the woolly mammoth perfectly adapted to cold temperatures, like its shaggy hair, curved tusks, and dome-shaped cranium. In other words, they need to identify which genes make the mammoth, well, the mammoth. Now comes the interesting part. They will use top-notch gene editing tools, kind of like scissors, to cut the Asian elephant DNA and replace those spots with the mammoth sequence. This will allow them to create a new cell line and, later, an embryo. This embryo will grow inside a healthy female Asian elephant, who will be the surrogate. And just like that, a new, cold-adapted elephant will be born. Or at least, that's what scientists hope. Specialists predict that this Mammoth 2.0 could be on Earth as early as 2028. The reason it will take a while is that their gestation period is around 22 months. But if that deadline feels too far for you, there is actually a chance we could get a surprise a lot sooner. That's because some of the other animals they plan to revive have a much shorter gestation period, like Australia's thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. The company is also doing whatever it takes to give this animal a second shot at life. And the good news is that the process seems to be well advanced. Recently, the group announced that the Tasmanian tiger's genome is about 99% complete. This animal was native to the Australian mainland and the islands of Tasmania and New Guinea. A big part of the Tasmanian tiger population disappeared over 3,000 years ago. But about 5,000 of them kept roaming around until pretty recently. It's believed that the last thylacine passed away in 1936. To revive the Tasmanian tiger, scientists first need a sample of the ancient animal. So they took RNA molecules from a 110-year-old preserved head that had been kept in ethanol. The team was really lucky because it's rare to find old samples that are so well preserved. allowing scientists to use advanced DNA analysis techniques. And by that, I mean they did a full, complete analysis. By studying RNA samples from important tissue areas like the tongue, nasal cavity, brain, and eyes, experts were able to learn a bunch of interesting things about the Tasmanian tiger. They could figure out how its brain worked, and also what this beast could smell, see, and taste. By the way, these semi-nocturnal animals had a special appetite for small rodents, lizards, and birds. After finding the perfect sample, the process of reviving it will be pretty much the same as with the mammoth, but with an elephant as a DNA donor, of course. In the case of the Tasmanian tiger, its closest living relative is a small marsupial called the fat-tailed dunnart. Even though this animal is small, it is a ferocious carnivore. So experts believe the whole DNA editing process will work just fine with its sequence. Their goal is to turn a fat-tailed dunnart cell into a thylacine cell. To accomplish that, they did more than 300 unique genetic changes into a dunnart cell. So there is no doubt they're pushing all the boundaries to make the dream of reviving animals a reality. This project also plans to revive the iconic dodo. You know, that funny-looking bird from the paradisiacal island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean? And here, things get a little trickier, since we don't know much about this creature, which has origins that go back about 23 million years. Basically, the only clues we have about what dodos looked like when they were alive come from a handful of drawings, paintings, and written descriptions from the 17th century. But since those pictures are all pretty different from each other, and only a few of them were based on real live dodos, we're still not 100% sure what they actually looked like. And as for how they behaved, well, we don't know much about that either. That's why reviving this long-absent legend will be super interesting and really enlightening. The sample they used to extract an old dodo genome came from a skull in the collection of the Natural History Museum of Denmark. And the dodo's closest living relative, which will provide the host cells, is the Nicobar pigeon, a gray bird with colorful features found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India. If everything goes smoothly, in a couple of years, we might see the fabulous and iconic dodo with our own eyes. Reviving animals might sound impossible, but science and technology together can be a real game changer, not only by protecting today's animals, but also by restoring species that disappeared from the planet long ago. Actually, we've already pulled this off. A wild goat called the bucardo, also known as the Pyrenean ibex, went extinct in the year 2000. But 3 years later, scientists managed to bring it back to life, using a method pretty similar to what we've talked about in this video. It took 57 tries, but one of them finally worked, and a bucardo clone was born. Unfortunately, the animal only lived for 10 minutes. You might think that wasn't a success, but it was actually a huge step forward in the whole animal revival field. Now, specialists can only hope the project to bring back the dodo, the mammoth, and the Tasmanian tiger go a bit better.
Harvard biologists have uncovered a truly bizarre frog species that sports extendable claws, much like those of a cat. This hairy frog breaks its own bones to produce claws that puncture through its toe pads, likely when it feels threatened. Some salamanders push their ribs through their skin to create protective barbs, but scientists have seen nothing quite like this claw mechanism before. 9 out of 11 frogs in this genus have this feature, and most of them live in Cameroon. A bee's life doesn't have to end after it stings you. Some of them can carefully take out the stinger without passing away later. The bee starts circling around until it loosens and takes out the barbed stinger. After that, it just flies away without leaving any marks on your skin. Unlike wasps, which are carnivorous and can be aggressive, bees are mostly peaceful creatures. They either stay in their hive or move from flower to flower, helping to spread life on Earth because they're crucial for pollination. For bees, stinging is a last resort because it means demise for them. so they can choose not to do it to save themselves. You probably have heard that a salamander can regrow its tail if it loses it completely. Well, Mexican tetra, also known as the blind cavefish, goes further and can grow back its heart. Well, sort of. It won't get a new, full heart overnight, but it can regenerate its tissues. Scientists decided it could be useful for us humans, as they're studying these fish, to see what's their secret, and why not all animals can play the same trick. Thorny devil dragon lizard surely agrees with the proverb, 2 heads are better than 1. The knob growing from its back serves as a false head to trick whoever is after it. They also have a special camouflage coloring and a scary spiny body for extra protection. And if it doesn't sound cool enough, they also drink with their feet. Now that's a handy feature when you live in the scorching hot desert. The water goes directly from their feet to their mouths through little grooves between scales. Meanwhile, some flies have eyes on stalks. It might sound strange, but those stalks are super useful. First off, they give the fly amazing vision, so good they can even peek around corners. Secondly, these stalks can be used as tools to push away rivals, and the longer the stalks and the wider the eyes are set, the more attractive the male fly appears to females. It's like their way of showing off that they're strong and have good genes. Spiders have some seriously awesome biological tricks up their sleeves, or legs. Spinning giant webs of incredible strong silk to catch bad guys is a real superpower, and Darwin's bark spider is especially good at it. This spider can weave massive webs that stretch across entire bodies of water, with anchor strands that reach up to 82 feet long. Scientists were curious about how strong this spider silk really is, so they put it to the test. They discovered that Darwin's bark spider silk is twice as tough as any other silk and 10 times stronger than Kevlar, which is an ideal body armor material. The web can handle insane amounts of kinetic energy before breaking, ensuring that no tiny insect or villain can escape its web. The real Hulk of the animal world is the male horned dung beetle. It is the strongest animal in the world. This little powerhouse can pull 1,140 times its own body weight. Its secret to success is its desire to find a partner. Female dung beetles dig cozy tunnels under piles of dung for mating. When more than one male shows up, the competitors lock horns and wrestle each other out of the tunnel. Smaller beetles also have a chance, though, as they can move faster and slip into the tunnel more easily. Meanwhile, an alpine ibex has the superpower of defying gravity. Yep, it can scale steep rock walls just to get a lick of salt to complement its vegetarian diet. It's like when you storm the nearest grocery store for some late-night snacks. Back in the animal world, ibexes use concrete as an unconventional salt lick. Animals can't live without salt. They need it for their nerves and muscles to function properly. Wild goats have these rock-climbing skills thanks to the elastic and rubbery pads on their hooves. They help them grip the rocks, and a hard, sharper outer hoof edge hooks into the tiny rough spots on the rock surface. Now, the pistol shrimp is just 1.5 inches long, but it can snap its claws at a speed of 60 miles per hour. That creates a bubble in the water that forms a vacuum, and it sends a powerful water pulse that can stun prey. The snap is so intense that it generates a noise of 218 decibels, louder than a gunshot, and a temperature that is as hot as the sun's surface. There's even a brief flash of light. Some scientists are thinking of creating a mechanical version of the pistol shrimp to use in medical practice or for a new type of compression engine. Now, if you go hiking in the trails of the Pacific Northwest, keep an eye on the ground and any decaying trees for some bright yellow spots moving along. These are the keels of a dark centipede about 2 inches long. If you pick one up, it will curl into a spiral and release hydrogen cyanide, giving off a strong almond scent. This amount isn't enough to seriously mess up a human. It can just stain your skin or give you an uncomfortable feel if you're sensitive. So be sure to wash your hands after handling one. But the same amount can take down a bird or a rodent. Speaking of birds, crows can count vocally up to 4. They're a lot like human toddlers when it comes to learning to count and quickly identify the number of objects they see. Scientists train 3 carrion crows to make a certain number of caws between 1 and 4 when they showed them a specific symbol or audio cue. All 3 birds mastered the task like pros, with some minor mistakes like 1 caw too many or too few. Crows can also plan ahead and communicate with each other in a structured way. Cowbirds, on the other hand, have secret passwords they use to recognize each other. They're a type of parasite bird, something like a cuckoo, and they lay their eggs in other bird species' nests. This means the little cowbirds can't learn their real parents' calls and would have trouble as adults to find a mate of their kind. That's why they have an inner mechanism where they recognize their species singing like some sort of secret password that only they know. Meanwhile, ghost crabs growl when they're around creatures they don't like or find threatening. They first show claws to intruders in their personal space to make them feel unwelcome. If that's not enough, they'll go for fearsome growling noises, like dogs. That sound is coming from rubbing their 3 elongated, hard teeth inside their stomach. Teeth in your stomach. Ghost crabs make the same noise when they're grinding up food. When a puffin feels like it could use a good scratch, nothing can stop it from solving the problem. Researchers notice these birds pick up a small wooden stick to itch themselves. The authors think puffins might need sticks to knock off seabird ticks. Looks like it's more effective than using its own beak. There's an Indian elephant named Koshik who lives in South Korea and can imitate words just like parrots do. Koshik can pronounce the Korean words for yes, no, sit, lie down, and 4 other words. He puts his trunk inside his mouth and shakes it while exhaling to change the tone and pitch of the sounds he produces. If you can whistle with your fingers in the mouth, it's a lot like that. I have news for you. Rats are ticklish. Well, I thought it was news. Anyway, they have a so-called laugh center in their midbrain, and it activates when someone tickles the animals or when they engage in some fun and playful activities. Scientists discovered this in 2016 after tickling the rodents on their bellies and listening to their squeaky giggles. Now, hummingbirds are the only birds we know about that can fly backward. They mostly do it when they want to move away from flowers. And here's an animal that can't go backward, a kangaroo. They can hop around and cross great distances, but the structure of their strong rear feet and big tails prevent them from walking backwards. Narwhals are those weird creatures that look like some sort of sea unicorns. That horn on their head is not a tusk. It's a giant tooth that sticks out through the upper lip of male narwhals. This tooth is probably one of the tools that plays a role in attracting ladies. Now, flamingos are not actually pink. They're born gray, but throughout their life, they eat lots of algae and other foods that contain a red-orange pigment we know as beta-carotene, like in carrots. This pigment gets broken down and ends up in their skin and feathers, which is what makes them pink. They need to eat a lot of such food to stay like that, though. If we humans wanted to change our skin color, we wouldn't be able to eat enough food rich in beta-carotene to really turn pink, or in our case, maybe even orange. Sloths are really slow. All the jokes and memes about them are true, but they're also very skilled swimmers, and they move in the water around 3 to 4 times quicker than on land. They can do breaststroke just like people, and it's an important skill for them to have because they're tropical animals that mostly live in jungles, and those areas are often flooded. Tigers are the biggest members of the feline family, even bigger than lions. And no tiger has the same set of stripes. Their coat is actually a camouflage that comes in handy when they need to find a good spot where their prey won't see them. Interestingly, their skin is striped too, not just the coat. Their stripes are as unique as our fingerprints. Now, even though they look kind of funny and innocent, you wouldn't want to bother a platypus. These wild animals are some of the few mammal species that can poison you. They have spurs on the tips of their back feet that can release venom. It's not potent enough to pose a life threat, but the sting can still be very painful and can cause swelling and other issues. When a ladybug needs to defend itself against potential predators, it starts bleeding from its knees. Now, it's not actual blood coming out of its joints. It's a certain chemical that smells bad and, therefore, repels predators. They have another mechanism that helps them survive in the harsh animal kingdom, their specific color. Predators really don't like the combinations of bright colors, such as red, orange, and black, because they know that creatures colored this way can taste awful. Roosters can get extremely noisy in the morning, but they don't go deaf because they don't even hear how loud their crowing can be. What keeps them safe is special built-in noise protection plugs. Hens have the same system that reduces the risk of hearing loss too. Not only do they have this protection, but they can also regrow cochlear hair ears if they get damaged in only a couple of days. Owls don't have eyeballs. They have something that's more like eye tubes, and they can't move them back and forth like we do with our eyeballs, which is why these birds have incredibly flexible necks. They're able to rotate their heads 270 degrees. For comparison, humans can only manage 180. That's why owls have a specific system of blood vessels in their heads. It delivers fresh blood to the brain if the bird turns its head too quickly and cuts off circulation. Just keep swimming. You may remember how Dory the blue tang sang this in Finding Nemo. Dory wasn't a shark, but that's a message some shark species need to take literally. Mako sharks, great whites, whale sharks, and some other kinds need to keep swimming. Otherwise, they'll stop breathing. We use our lungs for breathing, and some sharks use a method called buccal pumping. This means they swim with their mouths open. That way, they allow water to flow through their gills and thus extract oxygen. The most dangerous animal on our planet isn't a bear, a shark, or some toothy tiger. It's something way smaller, the mosquito. Not only is it extremely irritating, but it also transfers serious diseases such as yellow fever, malaria, or dengue fever. Annually, hundreds of thousands of people don't survive the battle with those diseases. Mosquitoes also outnumber every other creature across the globe, apart from termites and ants. Grizzly bears are incredibly strong animals with a bite powerful enough to crush a bowling ball. That's why you won't see them allowed in bowling alleys. Despite that, they're mostly light eaters. They're strong enough to make a meal out of whatever they come across, including a bison, moose, or elk, but they still like to munch on their fruits, nuts, berries, and even a small unfortunate mouse that gets lost and ends up in the predator's mouth. The inland taipan is the most venomous snake on the planet. We know it as the western taipan. It lives in Australia. Just one bite has enough venom to turn out fatal for at least 100 fully grown humans. And it can also do the job within only half an hour if you don't have anything to treat the bite right away. They say these snakes are mostly shy and they mind their own business. But, like other animals, they will attack if they feel threatened or provoked. There's a kind of turtle that can stay alive for months under the ice by breathing through its behind. When it gets colder, some animals can't find safe places to stay, so they must survive harsh winter conditions wherever they are. And while bees get cozy in their nests and bears sleep in caves, painted turtles stay in their ponds that freeze over. Since the ice limits their access to air, they extract oxygen directly from the water and breathe through their behinds. Yes, that would be handy. It's well known that ravens are incredibly intelligent animals. They're excellent at solving problems, but it seems they also have impressive social intelligence. They're very in tune with their feelings as well as the emotions of their mates. If one raven in the group feels pessimistic, it's likely to bring the others down too. A real buzzkill. When they see a bird that doesn't like certain food and expresses it in a very vivid way, they lose interest in their own food as well. The pistol shrimp is one of the loudest animals in the world, even though it's tiny, only about 3/4 of an inch long. When it senses food, it opens its large claw that can grow as long as half its body length and lets him water it. Then it snaps the claw shut extremely fast, which shoots out a very strong jet of bubbles. These bubbles can stun or even finish the prey the shrimp is trying to catch. And when the bubbles pop, it produces a snapping sound, louder than anyone would expect. Crocodiles are even scarier than we thought. because many of them can gallop like horses. They probably inherited this ability from their ancient ancestors, who were as small as cats, had long legs, and could run at speeds of about 11 miles per hour. Smaller crocodiles probably gallop when something's after them, but caimans and alligators obviously don't need to use this skill. It's you who's more likely to gallop away when you see them.
Chances are, you have a dog wagging its precious tail around the house or sniffing at your feet. Ever marveled at how keen your dog's hearing is? I mean, it can hear you opening a bag of chips even if you're on a different floor in the house. Even with this amazing ability, most household dogs don't have the best hearing in the animal kingdom. Actually, they're not even in the top 5. On that note, let's venture into the world of animal hearing and try to imagine what life sounds like for other creatures. Look, we humans are pretty great. We've got all kinds of talents, but when it comes to the auditory Olympics, we're not even in the running. Put us next to a cat or a bat, and our ears look kind of basic. Take elephants, for instance. They are big animals, and so are their ears. Their auditory organs are capable of capturing infrasound waves. Now, these are not your run-of-the-mill sound waves. They're low-frequency, rumbling whispers that we humans can't hear. This means elephants can pick up on things like rain clouds on the move. Not only that, but these massive mammals have a pretty clever way of communicating too. They stomp the ground, creating vibrations barely noticeable to us. But to elephants, these vibrations are the equivalent of a long-distance phone call. The messages are received through their feet and ear bones, even when they're miles apart. Talk about having a good reception. Moving on to bats. They are the masters of night navigation, thanks to their use of echolocation. These animals emit high-frequency sounds which bounce back after hitting objects. This echo helps bats create a mental map, allowing them to sway flawlessly in the dark. Just when we thought bats couldn't get any cooler, scientists discovered their hearing capabilities extend to their wings. Special hairs called Merkel hairs sense air movements, helping the bats detect upcoming objects. It's not the traditional hearing we're used to, but it's a fantastic adaptation to their environment. Dolphins, on the other hand, are masters of watery acoustics. For starters, you might think that being underwater would put a damper on hearing, but dolphins have turned this challenge into an advantage. They've got their own version of echolocation, emitting sonic pulses from their foreheads. These sounds bounce off objects and are picked up by the dolphin's jaw before being sent to the brain via highly developed auditory nerves. Their ears, though present, don't play a central role in hearing like ours do. Instead, dolphins have found innovative ways to listen, proving yet again how awesome animals are. Don't let their domestic status fool you. Your pet cats and dogs are auditory champs. Cats' ears are designed to catch high-frequency sounds from up to 160 feet away. Handy for catching mice, don't you think? Dogs, on the other hand, are pros at localizing sounds, thanks to the muscles around their ears. Ever seen your pooch perk up their ears when they hear something suspicious? That's their sharp hearing at work. Even the tiniest critters buzzing around us, like insects, can actually listen to the world. In fact, some insects have something akin to our human eardrums. It's a delicate little membrane, given the name tympani. Our eardrums jiggle with the sound waves. That shaking is then turned into a signal our brain would understand. Now, you've surely heard the nightly serenade of crickets or the rhythmic song of cicadas in the summer. These little symphony masters use exactly this kind of setup to listen to their world. That's not all, though. Some bugs take a different approach to eavesdropping on their surroundings. They've got these sensory cells right in the middle of their antennae. This structure is called the Johnston's organ. Take mosquitoes, for instance, or bees, or even fruit flies. They use their antennae, not just to feel their way around, but to listen in on the world too. It gets even wilder. Hawk moths, some dusky, nocturnal creatures, have this unique organ nestled right in their mouths. It's like a superpower that lets them hear ultrasonic sounds. With this, they can dodge the dangerous dives of bats out on the hunt. When it comes to the ultimate hearing trophy, the animal kingdom has a completely unique winner. It's actually a moth. Not just any moth, though. It's the greater wax moth, discovered by the scientists based in Glasgow, Scotland. They've got some fascinating insights about these moths that make our ears want to stand up and listen. Just to give you some context, the greater wax moth does not stand out when it comes to its appearance. I mean, it's brown. As for its daily activities, it loves nibbling on honeycomb. Despite blending in seamlessly in the animal kingdom, it's got a serious set of ears. How good is its hearing, you ask? Well, it's been found that this tiny creature can pick up on sounds at frequencies up to 300 kilohertz. By comparison, our human ears can only detect sounds up to around 20 kilohertz. This already unimpressive ability drops to about 15 kilohertz as we grow older. I mean, not even dolphins can compete. They can only hear sounds up to about 160 kilohertz. You're probably wondering, why would a moth need such super hearing? Scientists explain that the reason behind this extraordinary hearing lies in a survival instinct, predation, to be precise. Bats use high-frequency echolocation calls to find their tasty moth meals amongst other insects. But these clever little moths have evolved to pick up frequencies even bats might not hit. Despite this reasoning, it was a bit of a mystery as to why these moths would even need to hear such high frequencies. During the research, specialists discovered that their recording at high-frequency ultrasound is tricky business. So there's a chance that bats might actually be capable of emitting calls at these super high frequencies that the moths can hear. To uncover all this, scientists used a specially designed ultrasonic device. It emitted these crazy high frequencies, and they then looked at the moths' reactions using electrodes to measure their neural responses. The practical implications of this research could be far-reaching. Understanding the inner workings of the greater wax moth's ear could have a big impact on the world of technology. This knowledge could help researchers build super tiny microphones, for example. We know that all sorts of critters, from the tiny creatures scuttling on the ground to the gigantic ones swimming in the ocean, can pick up on certain sound frequencies that our human ears just can't. However, scientists have made a fascinating discovery. They've shown, for the first time, that our ability to pick up on tiny differences in sound frequencies might just be superior to that of animals, thanks to our individual neurons. How did they prove this, you ask? Well, they took advantage of a unique technique that lets them record what single neurons are up to in the auditory cortex. That's the part of our brain that's a major player in processing sounds when we're exposed to various noises. You see, most of what we know about the auditory cortex was unearthed from past research that studied how animals' neural activity reacts to sound. Those studies were super useful in giving us a peek into how sounds are processed in our auditory system. But they didn't really let us know what sets us humans apart in the way we perceive sounds. When scientists tested how we respond to made-up sounds, they found out that our neurons in the auditory cortex responded with a surprising level of accuracy to specific frequencies. They could even pick up differences as tiny as a quarter of a tone just by looking at the reactions of individual neurons. That's a level of detail that you wouldn't typically find in the auditory cortex of other mammals. The one exception might be bats, who use their hearing in pretty unique ways. But this could explain why we humans can distinguish between frequencies better than animals. It seems like the way our brains process sound frequencies has some special features to it. When they played more natural sounds like conversations, music, and everyday noise, the neurons showed complex activity patterns. These patterns couldn't be fully explained just by the neuron's frequency selectivity. Animal studies have shown similar phenomena, but it's the first time we've seen this in humans.
When we look at creatures in the animal kingdom, we often have the following thought. If they have similar traits, they must be related somehow. Zebras, horses, and camels must have some common ancestor. Same goes for dogs and jackals. Somewhere back in their lineage, they must have some common great-great-great-grand wolf, right? Well, the way evolution works in nature is way more complex. Take, for instance, convergent evolution, which is when different creatures evolve independently from each other but end up having similar traits. We only need to look at sharks and dolphins to see how this works. At first glance, they look very similar, aquatic creatures with some species having roughly the same size. But turns out they're mostly unrelated. Sharks are fish. They reproduce by laying eggs and evolved to have the ability to sniff out blood in the water to feed themselves. Dolphins, on the other hand, are mammals. They're friendly and have a way more interesting social life. Take bottlenose dolphins, which have their own special whistles that they use similar to how humans use their names. Not only do they develop this type of whistle to introduce themselves to other dolphins, but they can also learn such names so they can better communicate with each other. Sure, sharks and dolphins did have a common ancestor, but this one lived in the sea almost 300 million years ago. It's safe to say, dolphins and sharks aren't even cousins these days. Another more shocking example of convergent evolution is that of whales and bats. Most of the creatures we can name on the top of our heads use light and sight to understand the world around them. But there is a specific set of creatures that relies on sound to paint them a picture of their environment. What they do is they emit a sound which bounces back to them depending on the object it hits. This ability is called echolocation. Animals that have this feature emit sounds at frequencies above human hearing, called ultrasound. Those sound waves bounce off objects while they move around, allowing them to figure out where they are in a certain space. Echolocation is mostly used by toothed whales and by some species of bats. What's similar in both of these animals is that they need to hunt in the darkness. Despite this, they echolocate in very different ways. Bats, for instance, use their throats to generate ultrasound from their mouth or nose. Then, they proceed to listen for changes in the echoes. Their echolocation is so finely tuned that they can distinguish targets less than 0.01 inches apart, even if their target is moving. Whales, on the other hand, echolocate by pushing air through their nasal cavity. This movement creates vibrations in a special fatty organ called the melon. This organ focuses and modulates the sound, which then passes into the water around the whale. Whales then pick up the reflections of these sounds through their lower jaw and around the ears. Another striking example of evolutionary convergence is that of Ichthyosaurus and dolphins. Visually, the Mesozoic fish lizards named Ichthyosaurus seem very similar to modern dolphins. But the friendly mammals are much more related to giraffes and camels than the ancient creatures. Despite being 200 million years apart, they do share some common traits which mislead people into thinking they belong to the same species. But that's mostly because they lived in the same environment. They both evolved to feature dorsal fins, which keep them balanced while swimming. Now, let's look at Phytosaurus and crocodiles. The first ones were reptiles that roamed the Earth back in the Triassic period. They weren't dinosaurs, but they lived at the same time as the first dinosaurs did. Even though they look very similar, the first crocodiles popped up more than 70 million years later in the Cretaceous period. These two even fooled paleontologists at first. They initially assumed that phytosaurs were the ancestors of crocodiles. Placodonts and turtles look similar too. Placodonts, however, appeared about the same time as the dinosaurs did, somewhere around 235 million years ago. Like modern turtles, they lived in marine environments, but they were surrounded by predators. So,
they evolved to have really strong shells to protect themselves. Turtles, however, made it to the scene around 100 million years later. Even modern cats have ancient lookalikes. They were called the Sparacidons, but they were carnivores and marsupials. They used to live in the South American area and resembled the saber-toothed tiger, which is now extinct. Speaking of saber-toothed tigers, how about one that's also related to the kangaroo? Yeah, this creature used to freely roam the Earth around 300 million years ago. The Thylacostomelus may have looked like a feline, but it was a marsupial, meaning it had a pouch of skin in which it carried its pups for a certain period after their birth, like kangaroos and opossums do today. It's difficult to estimate what they looked like since a full skeleton has never been found, but we do know they weighed between 180 to 260 pounds. When we picture a present-day elephant, we always imagine them with their tusks protruding upwards. Well, that's not how their ancestors did it. About 20 million years ago, there lived a prehistoric elephant-like creature named Deinotherium. It did, however, have both tusks curving down from their jaw. As with many other prehistoric creatures, we don't know why they had this feature the other way around. But one theory suggests they used them as anchors. By securing themselves to riverbanks, they were able to safely sleep without drifting off. The last thylacine passed away in the early 20th century. Their extinction was one of the most tragic natural events in modern times. For the last 2,000 years, they have been known to live only on the island of Tasmania. Despite the name, they looked more like foxes than felines. However, thylacines were marsupials rather than placental mammals like foxes. The two-lake wallaby was one of the most beautiful and majestic creatures ever to have lived. It used to be found in Australia and New Zealand. They were very similar to the kangaroos and featured fine fur with shifting bands of darker and lighter gray across their backs. Surprisingly, they were dubbed monkey face, but they had no connection whatsoever to modern monkeys, apart from both being mammals. What made them so special was the way they moved around. Their standard movement consisted of 2 short hops, followed by a long one. After that, the wallaby would simply stare into the sky. Don't be fooled though, the two-lake wallaby was extremely rapid. Females were generally taller than males, and they appear to have been quite sociable animals, at times being particularly fond of a certain location. They were also nocturnal. Hyracoodonts and horses share a lot of similar features, but hyracoodonts used to exist in the Eocene and Oligocene periods, and they went extinct around 23 million years ago. In their whole group, they featured very diverse species and came in many different sizes, from the small pony-like to the colossal Paraceratherium, which is one of the largest land-living mammals ever to exist. Modern horses, however, appeared around 2 million years ago. Let's do a little experiment together. Start by stretching your arms out. If you were to draw a line from your fingertips to your shoulder, it would measure around 28 inches. Now, try to picture an insect with a wingspan this big. Hold on a minute, you won't need a large can of bug spray, don't worry. They're extinct. But the gigantic Meganeuropsis did live around 250 to 300 million years ago. However, they most likely resembled the present-day dragonflies, despite not being technically related. Scientists figured out that they were not true dragonflies because of differences in the shape of their wing veins. Scientists still don't know why these bugs turned out so big. Some believe insects are limited in size because of the small quantity of oxygen they're able to take in. In the times when these insects roamed the Earth, the levels of oxygen in our atmosphere were much higher, so that might be one explanation. Other specialists think that they got so big because there wasn't any other predator large enough to pick them up from the ground.
If you ever get one-on-one with an alligator, you can save yourself using just one simple trick. At least that worked for a young visitor of Moss Park in Florida who escaped a gator's grasp. Juliana was swimming in shallow water when an alligator bit her leg and refused to let go of it. Luckily for her, the girl knew exactly what to do because she was paying attention during her visit to a theme park with gators. First, she tried hitting the animal on the forehead, but it didn't work. Then, she decided to use her knowledge and stuck 2 fingers up the gator's nose. The animal opened his mouth to take in some air, and the leg was free. I don't want to scare you or anything, but there are around 5 million wild American alligators roaming across 10 states. Some of them live in places you go to rest, like golf courses, swamps, lakes, rivers, hiking and bike trails, and fishing spots. Gators rarely go after people because we're not their prey. Dogs and horses do it way more often, but they have a reputation as ambush predators, and every attack goes viral. The best you can do to survive a rare gator attack is to avoid it. Keep an eye out for a few signs that gators might be somewhere nearby. They love catching some rays, so if you spot some logs or banks where the sun's hitting just right, there might be a gator chilling there. Sometimes they're sneaky about it, with just their eyes and snouts poking out of the water while they soak up the sunshine. And when they decide to dip back into the water, they slide in without a single splash. Sneaky gators. During mating season, which starts around April and goes through June, they get pretty vocal. So if you hear some loud bellows echoing through the swamp, chances are it's a flirting gator. If you stumble upon what looks like a pile of vegetation on dry land near water, keep your distance. That's likely a gator nest. And trust me, you don't want to mess with Mama Gator when she's protecting her little ones. Their tracks resemble those of lizards or dinosaurs. So if you see something like that, it's probably time to escape to safety. People are usually the ones who provoke these toothy reptiles, not the other way around. You can do it if you get too close to snap the best photo or decide to touch its tail out of curiosity. Feeding them is also a bad idea, because they quickly learn that humans mean free snacks. If you come face to face with a gator, try to stay cool and respect their turf. If you're kayaking and spot a gator chilling in the water, just give it some space and paddle on by. And whatever you do, don't go slapping the water with your paddles so as not to scare and provoke them. If they still start swimming towards you, don't panic. Just calmly paddle away or show them you're not interested. If nothing works and the gator's trying to drag you under, aim for the sensitive spots. Crocs and gators are famous for their tough hides and armored bodies, but it turns out they have little pigmented spots scattered all over their skin. They're packed with touch sensors, making them super sensitive to pressure and vibrations. Even more sensitive than our fingertips, believe it or not. Scientists have several ideas about what these spots are for. Some think they might be little cleaning stations, secreting oils to keep the critters fresh. Others suggested they could detect electric or magnetic fields, or even sense changes in water salinity. But the latest study suggests they're mainly honed in on feeling pressure and vibes. They respond to everything from gentle ripples in the water to barely there pressures. Try poking them in the eye, hitting them in the top part of the skull or the side of the jaw. Or maybe just give them a good one too. If you're in the water, the main danger is drowning, not the bite. Get to land as soon as possible. Humans are way better on solid ground than gators are. But don't let your guard down once you're out of the water. A gator can punch you with its tail or the skull. But the good news is that alligators aren't known for their marathon running skills. It's pretty rare for them to chase humans on dry land. And even if they do, they're not winning any races. They top out at around 9.5 miles per hour, and they can't keep up that pace for long. So you have a good chance to run away, and you shouldn't do it in zigzags like the popular myth says. It'll just slow you down. They are way more efficient in the water, swimming at a speed of up to 20 miles per hour. Plus, gators can hold their breath underwater for up to half an hour. And some have beaten that record with an impressive 24 hours. They have adapted to slow their heart rates to 2 to 3 beats per minute. This way, they consume the oxygen in their lungs super slowly. They have their eyes smartly placed on the tops of their heads so they can see what's up above the water while hiding in it, kinda like a periscope. But not all is lost for you. If you can sneak up behind the gator without setting off its attack mode, you can clamp its jaws shut with some pressure. Even though their bite is no joke, they struggle to open their mouths when you're holding them tight. You can even flip that bad boy onto its back and send it into a chill mode. Try jamming something into the back of a gator's mouth. It should cause a gag reflex. If you can't pull any of these tricks, try making as much noise as you can. You might scare away the gator, and you'll let other people nearby know you are in trouble, so they can call 911 for help. If someone wants to save you, they have more chances of doing it on the ground, so they should never jump in the water to rescue you. All this works for alligators, but might not work for crocodiles. The first way to tell the difference between them is to check out their snouts. Gators have short, stubby ones with rounded ends, like a wide U shape. Crocs sport longer, skinnier snouts that taper into a point, more like a sharp V shape. Take a peek at their teeth. When gators close their mouth, you'll see their top teeth sticking out, mostly downward. Crocodile teeth are more evenly matched, with some pointing up and some down. Gators are freshwater fans, so they live in ponds, swamps, and lakes. Crocs live in freshwater, brackish water, and even salty coastal areas. Gators are usually more relaxed than crocs, but both can get wild, especially if they're feeling peckish. So if you spot either one in the wild, give them plenty of space and maybe a friendly wave from afar. Despite all the obvious risks, some people still think it's cool to have an alligator as a pet, although it's mostly illegal. The first problem is that you need a lot of space, because that tiny 7-inch gator you think is cute is gonna turn into a massive beast, especially if it's male. A gator has 80 teeth in its mouth and muscles that can crush bones with over 3,000 pounds of force. These guys are also really smart and can figure out how to escape their enclosure, anticipate your moves, and even use tools to get what they want. You might think you can train one, but it's not like teaching your pup to sit and roll over. It takes years of experience and a whole team behind you to change their wild instincts. Plus, they're bottomless pits when it comes to food. Finally, these guys stick around for a long, long time, over 50 years. So when you realize you can't handle it anymore or just don't want it, good luck finding someone to take it off your hands.
So get this, you're more likely to encounter a unicorn in a coffee shop than survive at the bottom of the ocean without air for more than half an hour. But some people are that lucky and unlucky at the same time. Take Chris Lemons, for example. Chris Lemons is a commercial saturation diver whose life changed in September 2012. It was a normal working day for him and his colleagues Duncan and David. They were sitting in a special chamber on the ship above the diving site. Then they entered a diving bell, crammed like sardines in a can. This is like another chamber dangling from the ship, which they use to get to the diving site. This chamber is like the claw machine you catch toys with, but instead of a claw, it has a small chamber at the end. They arrived at the diving site, and Chris and Dave prepared to dive. Duncan was staying in the bell to monitor the gear and, the most crucial part, the umbilical cord. This cord supplies divers with oxygen, heat, and power to keep their lights shining because at such a depth, it's super dark. So it's important for someone to monitor the situation since divers' lives depend on it. To better understand the process, you must know more about commercial saturation diving. Being in the office the whole day is much safer than being a commercial saturation diver, unless your office is in a lion's cage. Saturation diving is so rare and dangerous that you've probably just heard about it now. You must dive deep in the cold ocean to work on oil pipes and such. Diving in general can be risky because of something called decompression sickness. If you dive too deep and rise to the surface too quickly, tiny bubbles of nitrogen can form inside your body, which can cause serious health issues or worse. That is not a problem for regular divers because they don't dive nearly as deep as saturation divers. Saturation divers go from 600 feet to 1,000 feet underwater. That's almost the height of the Empire State Building. Rising to the surface from that crazy depth can take as long as 2 weeks. It takes less time to go to the moon and back. It's almost impossible to stay in the water for 2 weeks, so divers have a unique trick that keeps them alive. A chamber cleverly designed to have the same pressure as the bottom of the ocean. They spend months in this chamber. The chamber is isolated. It's like being in jail, but much worse. You can't get out no matter what. The world could be on fire, but you'd have to stay inside or pass away. The good news is that divers have the internet there. The chamber is filled with a mixture of helium and oxygen, so if you want to call your family, you will sound funny. Most divers don't call anybody.
Because it's fun to inhale helium and talk in a funny voice for a short time.
But doing it for weeks isn't very pleasant. Now you know more about this type of job and how dangerous it is. Thanks to all those clever tricks, divers can do their job without facing significant risks. But sometimes, bad things are inevitable. So let's return to our story. Chris and Dave had to replace a pipe section and do regular checkups at the bottom of the North Sea. For them, it was like teaching a cat to nap, whatever that is. But the weather above them was not so good. There was a strong wind and waves that reached 13 feet. On the other hand, weather like that was typical for the North Sea, so there was nothing unusual to worry about. The ship carrying out the mission had a crazy feature similar to autopilot. No matter how many waves there were, it would keep the vessel stable. The dive was going smoothly until the alarm started beeping out of nowhere. Dave and Chris immediately climbed in. David made it to the bell safely, but Chris's cord caught the edge of the manifold, and no matter what he did, he couldn't get out. He thought this should not have happened because there was plenty of slackline. He could hear the cord tightening, then realized that the ship had started moving. He had basically become an anchor, and as we all know, humans are not designed to be anchors. The cord snapped, and he fell to the bottom of the sea. This was the worst situation that could happen to him. He lost everything: oxygen, communication, and heat, meaning he would either freeze or suffocate. He had around 5 minutes of emergency O2, but that was not nearly enough to survive. Chris had to climb up to the manifold to be rescued, but when the cord snapped, his light went out, so he had to walk in the pitch-black sea and navigate by feeling around. Chris couldn't even see his hands, but he did the impossible and climbed to the manifold. The problems didn't end there, unfortunately. He was in the worst possible situation, and no one could tell him what to do or what had happened. Every breath was more valuable than a bucket of gold, so he had to breathe super slowly. Chris had only 2 minutes of oxygen left by the time he climbed up, and after some time, when he didn't see any signs of the rescue team, he lost all hope. The ship that was supposed to save him was in chaos. They couldn't stay stable to find him. All odds were against Chris at that moment. The only thing in his favor was that the ship had a small submarine that could be controlled remotely, and the crew could see what had happened to him. They got to the diving spot, and it was like watching a horror movie. You can't look away, and you can't unsee it. They all expected to see the diver in the worst possible shape. By some miracle, he was still moving, but not for long. Hundreds of people were glued to the screen, watching their colleagues suffer. They weren't that far from the site, but they couldn't do anything to save their friend. After the ship had stabilized, they went where Chris was. By that time, they had lost all hope and were going down to recover the body. David was tasked with getting Chris. He was feeling on edge, but prepared mentally for the challenge ahead. Around a half hour later, David finally arrived at the destination. He immediately grabbed Chris and climbed into the bell. Duncan was waiting for them inside. When they arrived, Duncan immediately took off Chris's diving mask. What they saw was horrifying. Chris's face was not the usual color, and he was cold. He looked like he had passed away. Duncan had tried giving him first aid, and suddenly Chris jumped up, lively as can be, and sat down in his seat. David and Duncan were shocked. Chris seemed to be completely fine. He was examined by lots of doctors and was announced to be as healthy as someone who had spent a half an hour without air could be. By all odds, he shouldn't have survived more than 3 minutes without air. No scientist to this day knows how he survived. It could have been because he had been exposed to a high level of O2 in the chamber, and he also had a higher than normal O2 level in his lungs. The cold temperature could have slowed down his metabolism and prevented him from losing too much energy, but nobody knows for sure. Now, you would think that after this, he would never dive again, but he continues to work as a saturation diver to this day and has no intention of quitting. He even got back to the same spot that nearly destroyed him and finished the job that he had started. Wow.
Let's go with the widely accepted theory that a massive asteroid hitting our planet wiped out the dinosaurs. It does make you wonder why mammals made it though. One idea is that mammals were better prepared. Back then, they weren't the most popular creatures on Earth, but they were pretty diverse. They bred themselves into a huge range of species, and it might have saved them. Some said mammals survived because they were smaller, so they needed fewer resources. As they had to constantly hide from dinosaurs, they managed to survive in difficult environments, way before the hit. But let's say the asteroid never came, and it never damaged the environment the dinosaurs thrived in. It's safe to say our fauna would look different today. Take the mighty Titanosaur. It's considered the biggest land animal to ever exist, some reaching lengths of about 7 standard cars lined up. It had a neck so long that it would have needed a 2-story home just to fit. It also had a plant-based diet, so it ate from the ground, but from very tall trees too. There was nothing much left to eat for, say, the little Jeremiah, a mammal that lived roughly at the same time, but was as small as a popsicle stick. Let's take this thought experiment a bit further and imagine we have a time machine that could transport today's mammals to the time of the dinosaurs. Some scientists say they have gotten bigger, so there's a chance they could survive, right? They're also much more evolved in terms of their diets and skills. Others say definitely not. They couldn't survive, mostly because they're too small to compete with dinosaurs. An adult T-Rex was just about the size of a bus. It probably wouldn't waste its time trying to capture food that's human-sized, for instance. They'd probably be on the lookout for prey the size of a car, or even bigger, like an elephant. And it most likely wouldn't take them long to win the fight. Sure, a T-Rex might munch on something smaller too, but only if it's really hungry and has no other alternative. If we had no choice but to send some mammals back in hopes they could survive, what would be our best bet? Some say the chimpanzee could be a good candidate, as these primates build their sleeping nests higher up in trees. This might have kept them safe from the carnivore dinosaurs living on land. There's no real evidence of dinosaurs being able to fly, but we do know there might have been some reptiles that took to the sky for transportation, like pterosaurs, the flying lizard. These ones like to eat fish and smaller animals, but who's to say they wouldn't pick up a chimpanzee given the opportunity? Another good candidate might be the hyena. Today, the spotted hyena is the most common big carnivore in Africa, and it's highly adaptable. They could snatch up all sorts of prey by themselves or even in larger units. They can digest most parts of their prey, including the skin and bones. These animals aren't picky eaters, and they wouldn't mind chewing on parts that other creatures would gladly skip on. Not to mention, they'll eat fruits too, if needed. Hyenas are overall healthy and sturdy animals, with some studies showing they hardly ever get health problems. But like any other animal on this planet, the hyenas also have their weaknesses. We still don't know why these creatures can't be found in Europe anymore. But some research suggests they found it hard to coexist with humans and wolves. Also, they're not very adapted to living in forests. Orcas might have been able to rub elbows with the dinosaurs too. These creatures also don't have any natural predators, which earned them the nickname the wolves of the sea. That's because they go out looking for prey the same way wolves do, in groups. Orcas may be related to dolphins, but we can hardly call them friendly, as there have been cases of them sinking ships on purpose. They're highly intelligent animals that spend time together and are very organized. They also do this thing where they often take down more prey than they're prepared to eat. It may be because they see this experience as training. Other theories suggest orcas are so intelligent that they look for food in advance, even though they're not hungry yet. It might also be because whenever they want something to munch on, they're looking for the best quality food there is. The reason why they might not survive in the dinosaur era, though, is the global temperature. Back in the Mesozoic era, our planet was seriously hotter, several degrees warmer than it is today. Orcas prefer living in colder waters, but you'll find them in all oceans and most seas. Ostriches are the no-brainer answer. Look at them. They're practically dinosaurs. They even have a long-lost dino cousin that lived in the Cretaceous era, called the Struthiomimus. Its name translates to ostrich-like because of its similar powerful and speedy legs, agility, and even feathers. On the downside, they might not be able to take down larger dinosaurs. The vegetation back in the Mesozoic era would have been different too. Conifers used to dominate land, and ostriches are known to be pretty picky eaters, so they might have had a difficult time finding food back then. There are plenty of reasons to send felines through that time machine too. In the Jurassic period, for example, there were plenty of slow-moving prey to eat and tons of hiding spots in the thick bushes. Felines are sneaky animals, have precise vision, and are extremely good at climbing. Some pack a punch for their size, making them fierce fighters. Lions are good contenders because of their speed and teamwork. They might be able to take down some decent-sized dinosaurs, like the Europasaurus, when working together. Leopards are really good at climbing trees, so they could snatch prey and enjoy it above the ground, where they might be safe from bigger predators. What might be their downfall is, again, the temperature difference. It was considerably hotter back then. Today's large mammals aren't equipped to deal with that extreme heat. Lions might be the kings of the savannah now, but it would be too hot even for them. If they ever want to grab a spiky-tailed herbivore for lunch like the Tugiangosaurus or Stegosaurus, they might be in for a surprise. One hit from their extremely powerful tail could cause some serious damage. Not to mention run-ins with raptors like the frightening Saurophaganix. The single most likely animal that might survive being roommates with the dinosaurs is the platypus. This quirky Aussie creature is one of those rare egg-laying mammals. It's a fan of freshwater and as close to a living relic as an animal can be. Scientists were able to trace its origin back as far as 120 million years ago. For food, it wields its sensitive beak to catch shrimp and worms underwater. When it dives, skin flaps cover its eyes and ears, so it becomes blind and deaf. But it still uses that beak like a high-tech radar. A grown platypus can even feast on half its body weight in a single night. Scientists have known for a while it shares many traits with reptiles, like its shoulder bones or the fact that it lays eggs. Other creatures that coexisted with the dinosaurs still exist today, just not mammals. Snakes made their way into our fauna in those prehistoric times too, as well as cockroaches and bees. Some species of sharks are even considered to predate the dinosaurs. And if we look at our entire planetary history, we'll see they survived 4 out of 5 periods of mass extinction. Horseshoe crabs have the nickname living fossils because their evolution was much slower than any other animal that we know of. Not because they're not smart, but simply because they found their perfect form much sooner. So they didn't need to make a lot of changes. They have a very rudimentary immune system, but it seems to work wonders. No wonder they stayed pretty much the same for over 400 million years.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.